It's time!
Content in this video may trigger you if you're a pansy, a feminist, soy boy, a white knight. So if you require a safe space and you don't know the real definition of tolerance, I suggest that you turn off this video and go find Drag Queen Story Hour somewhere. You might enjoy that better.
All right, guys, joining me is my man, Glenn Lawrence. He's the Manosphere's resident Hollywood heartthrob, and he's also the co-host of the Dragon Ship podcast with RP Thor, and he also does all the producing for Apex Mindset now. Now he makes videos on YouTube, and a lot of his videos are, he calls them correction videos.
I got Glenn Lawrence with me here today, too.
Glenn, we love Glenn.
The only white man I know on post. Welcome, Glenn Lawrence.
Mr. Glenn Lawrence. There he is, Mr. Handsome, Mr. Hollywood.
Oh, come on. All right, ladies and gentlemen, how you guys doing? Welcome. How you living? You guys doing well? Good. I hope you're all doing well. Tonight, we got something special for you. Now, myself and my guest here, we've had some exchanges recently. And you know, it's going to be like the Thriller of Manila. You know, it's going to be like the Clash of the Titans. You guys know who I'm talking about. Let me bring up and welcome you guys, Martae, because we have unfinished business.
What's up, guys? Out there in YouTube land, Glenn Lawrence's audience. He's right. We do got some unfinished business. So,
is that your background or my background? Oh no, this is Jack's background.
Like or something or what?
No. My buddy Jack Napier. He also uses my StreamYard. I just realized I'm in his background. There we go. Back to my background.
Yeah, there you go. All right.
So yes, we actually had we started a conversation. You called me an idiot. No, I'm kidding. You probably thought it. But
I called you an idiot.
Oh, you did? Oh, I did. Thanks. But we have a disagreement on the topic of, is polygyny a sin? Right? And you said I'm wrong. I said you're wrong. And I'm expecting you to show me my error in my ways and be ready for the correction that you're not expecting to get.
I mean, nobody likes correction, especially feminists. So, I mean, if you're open to correction, it means you're not a feminist or an entitled modernity living woman as a feminist. So, I mean, that's the thing, though, is when Glenn was on, and I'm speaking to your audience and my audience because I'm dual streaming here. One of the issues that I had with him saying that it's not a sin for two questions, right? For one, I was wondering, is this condoning polygyny, which he's clarified for me since then, but I'm still going to ask the same question because it also goes to my second question. Is it a sin? And for me, I've already defeated him, I think, but to my own regard. But then Sarah came in and said, oh, we got to have this brawl and we're going to do this. And I said, you know what? We're just going to have a backroom fucking brawl right here on his stream and my stream. No refs to break up this fucking fight. We're fucking men. Let's just fucking do it right now. I don't need no fucking ref. So that's why I'm here.
Yeah, and I don't need any witnesses. So, you know, okay.
Stitches, but there's like how many in the audience?
So, you know, okay, you said it's a sin. Clarify. And how do you get, so, okay, let me say this. I think it's smarter and wiser to say that the things that are listed as a sin in the Bible are the things that I'm going to call out as a sin. I'm not going to expand because there's 2 times in the Bible where it is written not to add anything to this text, because that would be a sin in itself, right? So if God doesn't clarify and state something is a sin, I think it's safe to say that I'm not going to call something a sin that God doesn't call a sin. You don't think that's a good rule of thumb? I can't hear you. Did you mute yourself? You're muted, bro.
I think that's a good rule of thumb. I think that's wise. I'm doing what what's his name did on Fatty's channel earlier. Apparently, it's like fucking transferable to me. So this is the thing,
You
though.
got
I think it's a really good.
PTSS.
What's that?
You got that PTSS now?
Man, I must have had it. It's the fucking shock this to my system, and it's going to continue on through my legacy, according to what's her name. Face forgot her name, anyways. It's irrelevant, anyways. So back to this, I think it's a really good metric to use if we're looking at something in the Bible that's a sin. If he blatantly says this, no, don't do this, don't fucking do it. I mean, I would say that too. That's literally what. Am I still manning your position correctly?
Yeah, because that's exactly what I'm saying. Is that there's no place where it is. It not only is there no place where it's actually explicitly stated this is a sin, because we know bestiality is a sin. Why?
Because God calls stated, and I'm going to show you. But go ahead.
Okay, but here's the thing: we actually see God create structure for this thing rather than outlawing it or banning it. And he gives there's two references in the Bible that I will present to show you that instead of God saying, no, this is blasphemous, or no, this is wrong, this is a sin, he actually says, if you're going to do this thing, do it in this framework, right? And so that, to me, if God is giving you a structure, then that can't be called a sin when he's giving you a framework on how to do it. Just like he gave us a framework on how to have sex within marriage, he said, in this confine, this is how you do this thing. When you see this other thing in polygyny, he says, this is how you do this thing if you're going to do this. So that's where I'm confused that, okay, he doesn't explicitly state it's a sin. And instead of, outlawing it and forbidding it, he actually gives structure and guidance for it. So to me, can't logically connect that God will give you guidance on how to sin. Because he doesn't do
I agree with that. I agree. So when we look at logic, God is logic, right? There has to be a logical mind behind this. Like, yeah, we could prove the existence of God, matter of fact, because if there was no humans to count or do anything, math would still exist. Meaning if two apples fell from a tree, it would still be two apples, not one apple, even if there's no humanity or nobody to count this. It's like we can logically know that there's still two apples. So math exists. There has to be a logical mind behind mathematics to even, so it's like, I can refute that all day. But here's the thing though. We're talking about something which is promoted in societies and is justified because it happened in the Bible. People can say, well, King David, Solomon had all this. And it's like, well, you could use references to say how to do this. It's like we have references in the Bible, bashing kids against rocks, but it's like there's also how to when doing bad things. It's like we have how to's throughout the Bible. So I'm going to really hit the nail on the head here. So by saying this, it's like if we think about polygyny being something that's allowed in the Bible, they've always led to consequences. And it's always been a learning lesson, no matter what. When we go outside this covenant, and those are outside of monogamy, which was like Adam and Eve was a monogamous covenant. We showed that if he wanted polygyny, he would have started off with a bunch of wives and Adam would have had this. No, but he started off with a monogamous marriage. And that was the example set forth that we all adopt. But I'm not going to go show you how it's a sin yet. I want to have this conversation to understand how this makes rational sense to you.
So let me present you my work here, okay? And so you can track with me. All right. One, we have scripture references, and I'm going to pull them up so we can read them, okay? In 1 second here, because I have my notes right here. I already mentioned that God permitted it and even blessed those in these polygynous relationships. I want to acknowledge that. And we see in Genesis 16, 1-4, God, Abraham took Hagar. It's an ugly name. She must be ugly. As a second wife, with Sarah's consent, right? And God did not rebuke him. Right. So I think that's very important to notice that God did not rebuke him in this moment. Instead, he did end up, telling him, hey, you got to send that kid out of here. But God also even blessed that child as well, right? So when God had the opportunity to rebuke him, he doesn't. So that would be a point where I'm kind of like, well, why not? Jacob in Genesis 29 through 30, and we see that he married Leah and then Rachel because he got bamboozled, right? And then he was given, both both wives give him a maidservant, right? For him to have more children with. And he's the one that fathered the 12 tribes of Israel, right? So God even used.
We have extreme circumstances where it was allowed because it was like an extreme. So, like, let's say if I had a woman and there's 3 other women were stranded on an island, what do you think is going to probably happen? Out of extinction of humanity or a certain subset of individual, it was allowed.
So this is why I said it can't be a sin, because it has to be. God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. So what he saw as a sin back then, he would still have to see as a sin today, or that would be God's word is flawed, because then he's changing when he said in his own word says that God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. So knowing these things and understanding this framework, right, that what God thought was a sin back then, he would still think is a sin today. And if it was, he never called it a sin back then. Can he call it a sin today? Now, I do have an argument for how it can be a sin today, right? But I'll get to that later. But so we got Jacob. I already mentioned that. But then David, right? We see in Samuel that David had multiple wives and concubines. On top of that, we see in the prophet Nathan comes to David, right? In 2 Samuel 12:8, right? God says to him, through David or through Nathan, and I'll have it right here and I'll present it. Do you want me to use the my Greek Orthodox Bible or with the NIV?
You can do whatever you want, bro. I want to give you
I'm just wondering whatever translation you like. Here we go. So 2 Samuel 12:8, and it's on the screen. It says, I gave you your master's house, or your master's house to you, and your master's wives into your arms. I gave you all of Israel and all of Judah. And if all that had been too little, I would have given you more. So now we see the prophet Nathan telling David that God's telling him God would have given him even more wives and more things if he wanted, if that was too little. So I don't understand how God would put David in a situation to where David would be living in habitual sin if it was a sin. Okay. Now I can understand the customs. People are like, well, the customs were different back then. Well, then now you're saying it's a cultural sin. This was accepted in the cultural. So therefore, it was permitted. But then once the cultural changed and then monogamy became the predominant thing. So now it's a sin. We're going to go through church history in a little bit too, but I'm trying to show you where I get confused with this. Right. And so when we see that David got corrected and chastised, not for polygyny, but he did get scolded and corrected for what? Well, infidelity or the adultery and the murder of Uriah, not polygyny.
Just to interrupt you real quick, I have 2 places where I show you it's a sin, by the way, not just one. I was wrong, but continue.
Okay. Well, I look forward to it. All right. So I'm going to present this one, right? So, and see if it's still on the screen. It is. Great. So this is Deuteronomy 21:15 through 17. This is after the part where I think in Deuteronomy 17 where it says kings not to take too many horses and too many wives, right? And because I'm pretty sure that would probably be one of your scriptures that you would use to support that claim, but which is be a good one, and it'll be a pretty decent argument. But we see here, if a man has 2 wives, he loves one but not the other, and both bear him sons, but the firstborn is the son of the wife he does not love. When he wills his property to his sons, he must not give the rights of the firstborn to the son of the wife that he loves in preference to the actual firstborn. The son of the wife he does not love. He must acknowledge the son of his unloved wife as the firstborn by giving him the double share of all he has. That son is the first sign of his father's strength. The right of his firstborn belongs to him. This is God through Moses giving structure on how an individual who is in a polygynous relationship needs to address or handle his affairs, when he's willing his assets, to the kids. That doesn't sound like condemnation, though.
This is your argument that you had before, though. Just real quick, though. This is your argument before when you were Muslim and you're going to the church, and what do you do with your other wives? This is alongside that, and I can understand why he's addressing that. But go ahead. I'm just agreeing with you on that.
Okay, because this is God's people, so I'm just kind of going with this here, right? So, and then the next one is in Exodus 21:10, right? And I'll present it here. And like I said, if I'm wrong, I have no problem standing corrected. But when I whoop that ass, it's going to be you. No, I'm kidding.
Let's do it, man. Let's do it.
All right, here we go. Exodus 21:10, or yeah. Yeah.
Look like you lost in the weeds over here, man.
All right, here we go. In Exodus 21:10, it says, if he marries another woman, he must not deprive the first one of her food, clothing, or marital rights. Again, this is structure, boundaries.
This would also apply outside of marriage too. Like just to be a good-natured man.
I'm looking at something that is very okay. So I'll go back to the whole passage here. If a man sells his daughter as a servant, she is not to go free as the male servants do. She does not please the master who has selected her for himself. He must let her be redeemed. He has no right to sell her to foreigners because he has broken faith with her. If he selects her for his son, he must grant her the rights of a daughter. If he marries another woman, he must not deprive the first one of her food, clothing, and marital rights. If he does not provide her of these things, three things, she is to go free without payment of money. Now, this again, here is structure of if you're going to do this thing.
No, I'll grant you that. I'll even grant you this, Glenn. I'll grant you all that actually too.
So this is where I get confused, right? Because so far we don't see anywhere in the Old Testament where polygyny has been condemned. You know, God saying, "Thou shalt not do this. This is a sin. You know, you're going to hell." You know, nothing. Yep. Right? Okay. Right? I'm just asking you, have we seen anything so far? I presented you David.
I'm not saying that. I'm just saying if it happens to be that you're in a polygynous relationship, this is the structure. I get that.
Okay. And that's God given through Moses. Great. All right. So then we see in the Old Testament in like Jeremiah, and I think is it Ezekiel, where God actually refers to himself as a man of two, wives, referencing Jerusalem and Judah, and he's issuing them a letter of divorce, right, for their whorish ways. The imagery is of a man of married to two women, right, and that would be common in that time frame, because why? If God was relating something to them as that they would understand, right, in the imagery of what was custom or what would be a common in their culture at that time. Would you agree?
Yeah, I would agree.
Okay, so God display himself as a man that's sinning? Because then that would be confusing to those that are following him, like, oh, maybe God's
consistent.
I know, but I'm saying if he's doing this, presenting this image through Jeremiah and Isaiah, I believe, the image of being a husband of two wives, then it's like the people that are hearing this message must either, one, not be rejecting it, like, how dare God? Why would God do that? Like, they have to receive it and understand, like, oh, this is common in our culture. It's not hard or it's not uncommon to see a man with two wives or more than one wife, right? Because it would be a shock to them if they were like, oh, wait a minute, why is God talking about being married to two women? This is weird. Are we supposed to have an extra wife? You know what I'm saying? Like, so I'm trying to understand the thought process there. Okay, so that's Old Testament. In the New Testament, Jesus doesn't condemn polygyny. He doesn't even mention it. None of the apostles mention it. Not even Peter or Paul, right? Ever explicitly bring up polygyny even when they have the opportunity to address it. And I do have a historical timeline here I would present to you through church history of going through what was going on at this time all the way until when it was officially labeled a sin. And it was never, through church history, it was never something that was acknowledged in the beginning of the formation of the church. So this is another confusing part that I have where I have questions about. Okay, so you want me to present that to you now?
Yeah, you can present that that argument too.
So we also see in the New Testament, right, as I pull this up, 1 Timothy 3:2 and Titus 1:6. That's addressing a man of one wife, right? But that was for a position of elder. That is a role, a position, or state, a status in the church, a role of authority in the church, right? That's not a layman. So when they're saying that the elder or the deacon has to be a husband of one wife, they cannot be drunk with or too drunk with wine, and they have to be able to teach or something like that. Those are requirements for an elder, not a layman. So I think understanding the context of that is important. One, for multiple reasons. I think why would they have to say you need to be the husband of one wife if they all were husbands of one wife? They must be had husbands in the churches at the time that were husbands of multiple wives.
Well, there could be examples of this. You can say this, and that could be like just, I mean, those two things aren't mutually exclusive. You can have somebody say, you know, the clergy can have one, but they can also, but we also don't see a refutation of saying that, no, he's not talking about the other people. It doesn't even say that.
I know, but so what I'm pointing out
this is why interpretation is extremely important with this.
It is. But what I'm pointing out is that the position of authority in the church had to meet this standard. There was a threshold, right? And if you were practicing anything other than that, you were not qualified to be an elder. Okay, so if a guy had multiple wives, you can see that he could be a Christian and be part of the church, but he cannot have a role in the church as an elder. You could come to that.
Right, but that could be the minimum standard that I could adhere to, that also clergy just happens to be in line with adhering to as well too.
I agree.
Right. So we need minimum standards for them to even adhere to. This is like, could be a common practice commonality. That's all they're talking to probably.
But I can see that. I can see what you're saying. I can also see that there's a standard here, and those that don't meet the standard are not less Christians. They're still believers. They're still part of the church, but they cannot advance higher than laymen because of their relationship. Because what I think that they were doing back then is we're going back to God's original design. Hey, we're referencing Genesis here because this is what God wants from the beginning. But since there's no outlaw or outright condemnation of this thing called polygyny and has been practiced, then we could allow it in the church, but we're not going to allow you in position of authority. That's all.
You mean that you see condemnation?
That's how I see it. Because
we're just running through your logic right now. We're going to get to my section, but I'm letting you go through. I'm letting you run right now.
Okay. So the quote, and everybody likes to use Matthew 19, that Jesus is talking to the Pharisees, right? And they're like, well, Jesus says right there, a man that he leaves the father and mother and joined to his wife, and the two become one flesh. And, if he divorces his wife for any other reasons other than sexual immorality, and he marries another, he's committing adultery. I'm like, yes, you're right. But what is the topic and context that he's actually talking about? He is talking about divorce. So I think it's important to know exactly what he's referencing and say, well, I'm going to take this passage and say, see, he's talking about polygyny too. No, that would be adding to or implying more than what is actually given there. So the topic was divorce. Here's my question though. Divorce from what? From a polygynous marriage or from a monogamous marriage of one person? Maybe either. I don't know. Because we do know that they were practicing polygyny at that time. Even historically, even the time of Jesus, they were still practicing polygyny. So right, but hold on, we could be also making assertions that aren't there as well too. The other way too, in saying, well, they could be talking about polygyny. That could also be wrong as well too. That's why I'm open to he could be talking about either. But I'm letting you run through it right now. I'm saying, okay, what we do know is that Jesus is saying any man that divorces his wife for anything other than sexual immorality, whether it's the guy in a polygynous relationship or a guy in a monogamous relationship, I think the standard would still be the same. You cannot divorce your wife for anything other than sexual immorality. And if you do marry another, then you are committing adultery. I think that standard would be the same for whether the guy has 3 wives or 1. So you know what? I'll even grant you that. Okay. What the hell? I'll just grant you that too. All right. Now, when it comes to the early church, and this is where you might be able to help me out because I'm a little confused at this. And they're nowhere in Acts do we see the apostles address this, because we do know that they had converts, the Gentiles that were also practicing polygyny at the time, intermingle and come into the body and become Christians. There's no addressing of, and even the Jerusalem Council in Acts 15 never addressed it. Polygyny is never mentioned. If it were sinful, this would be the perfect place to prohibit it, because they are informing these Gentiles what is expected of the church, right? And it's something that never is mentioned. There's no record in Acts or any of the epistles of men being disfellowshipped for having multiple wives. And even Jewish Christians continued practicing polygyny. Even during the second temple of Judaism allowed polygyny. Josephus and Aquinas 17.1.2 actually writes about this. Jewish converts didn't stop practicing this polygyny overnight, and scripture never instructs them to stop practicing polygyny either, right?
Right, but there could be a distinction between Judaism and Christian ethics.
Well, this is Jewish Christians, Jewish people that were converting to Christianity is what I'm referencing, because those were the people that were living there, right? And the Romans. The early church fathers were culturally biased, but not theologically clear on where they stance on polygyny. And I will reference Augustine in his writings on I think it was on the good of marriage, chapter 15. He states that the plurality of wives was no crime when it was the custom, right? It is a crime now because it is no longer the custom. This provides the church's objection that it's not a moral issue that they have a problem with, but a customary issue. He further goes on to say that that although it was divinely permitted at that time, it is no longer necessary. So he's saying that although that polygyny was practiced and it was not a sin when the patriarchs did it, but today it's not necessary for men to do it, because they did not do it out of lust. They did it out of necessity, meaning they needed to grow the Israel, right? He was saying that if guys were doing it today, it would be not as a divine, thing. It would be a lustful desire, and that would make it wrong, right? Even Tertullian writes about it. He advocates for monogamy for idealistic and aesthetic reasons, but he actually never calls it a sin either. And then Clement of Alexandria and Origen and others leaned towards celibacy or monogamy, but they never launched a biblical case against polygyny in any of their writings either. Now, this is where there's the difference between Orthodox, and this I did a deep dive on church history here, so I'm going to try to do my best to respectfully address the Orthodox position as well as Catholic and then Christian or Protestant, just kind of show you where I kind of get confused here.
Yeah, you can go through it.
The Greco-Roman influence kind of overlooked the Hebrew tradition at that time, right? Because Rome was what, Constantine was ruling. That's what Constantine is the one that, legalized Christianity. Christianity needed to kind of mirror or adopt some of the customs and the norms, right? Cultural customs. So it was an easy transition. And that's a lot of political historians say that about this process. So Roman society promoted monogamy as civilized and branding polygyny as barbaric, right? So we have the culture of that time shaming this, kind of going away from it. As Christianity spread through Roman Empire, church leaders absorbed Roman sexual ethics, meaning their position on polygyny and monogamy, right? Although they were already leaning more towards monogamy, but they were just more separating themselves from polygyny. Although they were not saying outright that it was, a sin or anything, they were just not advising it, right? Then in the canon, so the canon law reflected a Roman politics, not scripture. The Council of Tertullian, I believe that is, in 692 AD, Canon 48 forbids clergy of marrying multiple wives or taking a second wife, but it applies only to clergy, and even then, it doesn't even call polygyny a sin. So
where does it say that it only applies to clergy? Do you see only in there somewhere?
Yeah, so it says that, but it applies only to clergy, and even then, it applies not, or does it call polygyny a sin? So let me pull up the reference notes here that I have. Like I cite my sources.
Yeah, because only would be a big change. That's very specific if it says only. But if it says it applies to clergy, that doesn't mean only, right?
Well, if he's saying that clergy cannot marry a second wife, that it would be clergy's, that's who they are addressing. Right.
But if it says only, this means that, okay, now it's specific. Now it's saying everybody else, it doesn't apply to them. But if it doesn't say that, then it doesn't say that it doesn't apply to everybody else. It's just saying that specifically in this position, these are the requirements you have to have. You can also say that this applies to clergy while using this as an example for everybody else to follow. That happens all the time.
True. But, again, you would think that I don't ever see God as a God of confusion. And if he wanted something to be clearly stated, he clearly states
not
it.
Confusing. To me, it's not confusing. Like if I see somebody that's a law enforcement officer that doesn't murder, I think that I would not murder because he sets a good example for me not to murder unjustly, right? If there's unjust murder, we would think that we would follow suit, but that's the minimum requirement for an officer, a police officer, or corrections, or anybody else. That's the minimum requirement that they have to adhere to. Now, the public, there's common sense. Obviously, there's logic too. Common sense would tell you that this also applies to the public. You don't even need to state this. So, I mean, these two things can be tangential to the subject of saying the same thing.
No, I can understand that. But I also understand that, there's many accounts where it's addressed explicitly who they're addressing. And when it's something that they're explicitly addressing to an individual or a specific group, that doesn't mean he's actually also talking to the other group.
Well,
either.
That's what I'm saying, though. If I'm talking about the police officer in reference, they're saying this specifically to the police officer because they have more responsibility. Not saying it doesn't apply to everybody else, but if you're looking at clergy, they have more responsibility with the same expectations as the congregation.
Now, I would say that
that's what I'm saying.
I would say that it may not, it's not explicitly applying to the layman, but it is a good role model, a model for the layman to follow, right? I could definitely see that, but if it's not explicitly saying something that they must do this, I don't think that they're held to the same standard is what I'm getting.
Oh, it explicitly says that, but we'll get to that later.
Okay. I'm pulling it up here exactly. That passage. Here, I'll pull it up and share it with you. Here, because it's this one. I try to do my notes, and I always share my notes as well. So if you want any of this information, I'll provide it for you. Last council 1681. Okay.
Me, I'll just tell you where I'm getting it. I can use like the scripture, or I can use the logical entailment for mine. So
yeah, I'm not smart, and I don't even try to say that people are smart enough to use logic. So
no, it's good. I'll explain it to you. I'll use very small words. You got it.
You gotta use like $2 words with me, okay?
Gotta use penny words. You got it, bro.
Oh, even better, bro. Thank you.
Fuck. It's the food stamp edition right here. We got it.
Yo, I am too light-skinned to have food stamps. You know that.
Nah, whites are definitely taking a part of the welfare system for sure.
They're not real whites. No, I'm kidding.
No, I brought my Quest card for this conversation, bro. Just for you, man.
Okay, second, lacking authority in describing down later on. I want to get the exact quote, so bear with me. Justin, the son of Constantine.
Under Constantine said bishops should Holy Six definition.
It sounds like you got an air conditioner or something running in the background. Oh,
I
it went
do.
away.
I'm hot. I'm in LA. I could turn it off.
Let's see.
Now you're good. It just got extra loud for a second.
Oh, because I got extra quiet. Sixth definition. Dying. Okay. Here we go. Come on. Yes. No. Suffering faith under the bushes, leading us to teaching, go to worship Christ and Holy God. Likewise, we complete faith which set forth 150 fathers and sons.
Remember, this was supposed to be a debate, but we're just having a conversation, so that way we can have all this time. Normally, we wouldn't be allotted all this. We'd be
and
all right, your turn. You got 2 minutes.
and see, in a way, certain topics like this are better to be dived into like this, because it's not about I'm not about like getting sound bites, and I'm looking for the truth. I really am. That's my true heart's desires. I want to know.
That's why I came here, because I didn't want to feel like I had a slugfest, and of course I do like slugfest. I don't shy away from.
There's a time and place for that. There's a time and place for that.
All the time is a time. You ask me, I'm fighting all the time.
Look, I tell people, look, I only got 2 cheeks. And I only was told to turn the other cheek, and I run out of cheeks real quick.
Yeah, I don't turn the cheek. I can't do it. If you hit me, I got to hit back harder. This is how it works.
Yeah. I will still hit you. I just will turn the other cheek as I do it.
Yeah, when I do the uppercut.
I'm turning my cheek. He never said how I had to turn my cheek.
The biscuit cutter. It's a wrap.
I have to show you the shirt that I made. It says just recently saved. So I'll still knock a motherfucker out, but I'll pray for you.
Yeah, you can still sleep with these angels.
Okay, so the camera.
Okay, so is this the last point that you're going to bring up, Glenn?
No, the only other point I need to bring up after this is the timeline. Right, I'm trying to show you the timeline. That's why you said you wanted the exact quote from this. But there's a couple other points in the timeline that I want to present. Just
keep in mind, it doesn't have to be accurate. This isn't like an Oxford debate where we need.
All right, I could just I'll send this to you. You could. It'll show you the reference
version, just what you think, and we're just having a conversation, right?
I just like to be thorough with the information, because I don't like to mislead people. So then we get from this time frame. This was Tertullian, I believe I said it was. We see that in Justinian's Novellia, I don't know his name, some Italian probably, 6th century, civil laws restricting polygamy began to be enforced on Christians. So now it was not until the 6th century do we see civil laws being enforced on Christians. But again, this is Roman legalism, not divine law. Right, so we see the Roman law are enforcing civil, consequences on Christians who are practicing polygamy, right? Because they're now considered citizens in the Roman nation. Now, here's the last point. In 1580, I think it is, or 65. We see even during the reformers, right? This is the Protestant Reformation. Martin Luther even presents an argument or a letter to Philip of Hesse, it is, and it states that he cannot say that he or forbid a man to marry more than one wife, for it does not contradict the scriptures. So what I'm trying to show you here is what we see is like this not very solidified position. Even Constantine said, hey, this is, it's not good now, but that doesn't mean it was a sin back then. And it's a sin now because God says. It's like, no, this is not allowed now because of the law that we live under. So here's my reason for why it would be a sin today is that God put the authorities that we have above us. He put them in place, right? So therefore God said, obey the laws of the land, right? If the laws of the land are thou shalt not, or that you can't be polygynous or have two wives legally, then any man that tries to do that would be sinning because they're breaking the law and not obeying the laws of the land. That would be my argument to say that it would not be able to be practiced today currently.
That is one of the points that I have. So by the way, since you've already hit on one of my reputations that I have, I was going to ask you if not submitting to a governing body be a sin.
Governing body as in like your church leadership, like your church body, or like the governing body, like your
not
government?
Only that, but I'm saying the law. If the law says don't eat pork, and we're banning pork in America, and you eat it, and there's probably some casualty happening. Like, let's say every time you ate pork, somewhere a little kid died, right? And if a kid passes away or something like that because we eat pork, the government's like, we're not going to eat pork because of this whole instance that's happening. Like, and I'm using an extreme being kind of hyperbolic. Like, let's say the government does say only eat beef in America or only eat chicken. Is it a sin to eat chicken now in America? If the government says don't eat chicken?
If the government has outlawed this practice of doing this thing, then yes, it would be wrong for us to do anything that would, because God says obey the laws of the land, right?
Great. Okay.
Unless they contradict with God's word, God's law,
which it doesn't. It doesn't contradict with God's word. So
that's why I concede to the point where in the current laws right now, because we do know laws can change. Gays weren't allowed to get married. Now the fruit packs are allowed to do all the stuff, So
which contradicts with God's law.
Yes,
that would be your only point.
But laws are available to change. They can be changed. They can be voted on and amended. So I do want to point that out. That currently I could concede that argument to you, but that could also be changed. Is what I'm pointing out.
Yeah. So, I mean, you concede that it is a sin if the government says this, because the idea is rooted in passages like things like Romans 13, 1 through 7, where it says it emphasizes submission to governing authorities. Now, granted, it's like, so like, let's say if it doesn't outwardly say that it's a sin, where you say in your section of your Bible or whatever you can read, I can point to where
I can pull it up in the Orthodox Bible too, if you want.
I can point to where it hints that it is a sin. But here's the thing. We're going to go to this point first. It does emphasize that submitting to government authorities is in alignment with practices and law unless it contradicts the Bible. So here's the thing, though. If polygyny is outlawed by a governing law like our United States military or state legislature, and it boils down to like even where I'm at right now, Arizona, and it says it's against the law and I commit an act of having polygynous marriage, I'm committing a sin. So it is a sin because the Bible's using a reference to the law of saying me having to submit to this. Therefore, it is a sin. Now, granted, you're talking about something that can be conditional to governments, right? Now, here's the thing where I'm going to get to is that even if Constantine says we're not going to do this and Christians obeyed with this and it didn't contradict the Bible, this has been a sin since then. So if you're even using a timeline, it's been a sin since this village.
What I wanted to point out, though, in the timeline real quick, if you don't mind me, is that when Constantine did it, it was not outlawed. It wasn't outlawed until officially till the 11th century. That then it was, they were not even acknowledging, the church was no longer acknowledging previous polygynous relationships that they once did acknowledge and accept in the church. They actually now then at that point rejected them. So it wasn't until the 11th century. And that's why I want to say it has not been historically the position, right, that it was a sin. And it was more due to cultural norms and at the time. That's what it looks like to me. At least that's how it seems.
I have a question for you. Do you think that the church would rise up out of nowhere if the government turned heel and said, we're going to have polygynous relationship, we need to promote this because this is what's happening right now in societies. You have more women than there are men in society. Statistically, we can see this. What if the government...
We need more men to die. That's what it is. We need people to die. People are living too long. Like,
we
think
need
about
more
it
people. We have a
historically.
declining birth rate right now.
No, we do have a declining birth rate, but people historically have not lived as long as they are living today.
So, but Glenn, this is my point, because I think we can kind of steer off topic a little bit. This is my point. There's more women than there are men, right? Would you agree with me? Statistically, you may see this.
I think it's 2 to
there's
1.
more women than men.
2 to 1, right?
Yeah, 2 to 1. So, like, let's say the government says, okay, in order to make things more equal, we need to have more polygyny in America. Do you think the church would come up and say, you know what? We're going to obey the law and support it because it's a sin to disobey the law? Would that contradict the Bible?
No, I don't like the example that you presented, but let me present an example to kind of maybe see if it could work. No, I'm just saying it because I don't think it addresses the way that the church would do it, in my opinion, right? So look at Ukraine right now, right? Ukraine they've been at war for a couple of years. They have lost a good percentage of their men. Let's just say they didn't send all their wives away, right?
Hold on real quick. I never stated how the church would do things. I'm just saying, like, what would the church do? Do you think they would support it? That's all I'm saying.
I don't think they would necessarily like outright support it and like champion this thing, but I don't think that they would call it a sin, and I think they would accept it, due to the fact that it's not against the law, and we see that it only became illegal in the sense of what was civil law was being reflected on here.
Do you think the church would promote it? Meaning, like, we're going to have a wedding.
Like I said, I don't think they're going to be running ads and championing it and encouraging guys to take second wives.
I'm talking about, do you think that ceremonies with 2 women and 1 man would happen overnight if the laws changed in churches?
I think they will probably done quietly, just like Luther did Prince Philip's. He did his secretly, because he said that Prince told Prince Philip it would be more of a sin to divorce his wife than it would be to marry a second one. That was that conclusion. Now, I'm just showing you there's inconsistencies throughout church history.
I don't see it happening, but I mean, if you could show me how the church would promote this, that would definitely. I don't
think they would promote it, but I don't necessarily think they would condemn it and shame somebody for doing it at the same time.
I don't think that would happen, but you see the church conceding, and we're having rainbow flags in Western churches, things like they make concessions on this all the time. But I'm talking about what are you, by the way? Are you non-denom or?
Honestly, I was non-denom. I do have like a Baptist background. I went through Liberty, so Liberty is.
Me too. I was Baptist back in the day.
So, but honestly, I'm diving more into Orthodoxy thanks to Andrew. Actually, Andrew dared me to go to an Orthodox church when I was in Vegas, and I did for him, and I took a video of it. Love the church. I was really confused at the service though, but that's another story. But I am looking more into it. I'm trying to figure out what fits best for me, where I feel more led to. I do like the structure that Orthodoxy has, but there's a lot of questions that I do have that we'll get into it again. It's about divorce. There's another topic I would love to talk with you about that it just doesn't sit well with me. So I get confused about it. The church's position on it. So I'll just say non-denominational, but searching still.
Well, the reason why I ask this is because if you look at Western churches, they're conceding all over the place. You're talking about a 65% congregate rate of women. They're more so anything that's patriotic and not patriotic, even that too. But I'm talking about like a patriarchal role in the church or a patriarchal message, man being the head of the household. They're slowly weeding this out because they need to fill and line pastors' pockets. And now what's happened is now we've had women and congregates staying while the men are just running off. They're actually leaving the churches.
I have been talking about this for 4 years. I said the church, the modern day evangelical or Christian church, Protestant church, is adversarial to men. It's all but said that you're not welcome here. And church has gotten super gay. It's gotten gay.
Has reached to the churches to this degree where it's like now we see money, and it's how we have feminism. You're talking about rich industrialists programming and conditioning women to vote a certain way and say, hey, no, you want to vote. It's like, well, because we're lining pockets. Same thing with the church. Feminism is rife throughout the air you breathe, water you drink, things like this. It's like, it's just constant. The reason
you and I probably still have reminiscences of feminism that we deal with that we don't even know yet. Because I think
if I acknowledge it, I call it out and I fight it.
Well, I mean, I'm saying like when you're made aware of it, you're like, oh shit, I didn't even know I was still doing that, or something like that. I still think that since we've been indoctrinated in feminism for the last 60, 70 years, we have a lot of stuff to unprogram ourselves from. And you know,
well,
it
that's why you
happens
want to
over
surround
time.
yourself by men. You want to surround yourself with good men that call you out on your own bullshit.
I like what you
think
said.
that when
Good
we-
men,
Yes,
not
good
just
men.
men.
And
Good men.
way better, because like that's the thing though, is I don't believe like I have a female friend relationship with anybody, to be honest. Like I had peers and associates at work, but I don't have female friends. They're not going to help me out. And it's like I need based good men, real men who are Christ-like around me. To me, and that's why I have such a good relationship with Andrew Wilson, and I look up to him a lot. He could say he's not a role model. He is, whether or not he believes so or not. So I look at this and it's like we have to surround ourselves with good men. We're losing that as single moms have increased throughout America. We could say, well, it's not that many as we think it is. It's too many. And that's my problem, is that the reason why I asked you about what denomination you are, it was like, well, I'm looking at this through the Orthodox lens. And for me to say if the Orthodox Church would accept this, because so that's why I'm trying to kind of hone in on this. We have non-denominational churches that accept pride flags. So it's like, well, when I talk about the church, I think that we're looking at the Orthodox Church.
And I understand that, because then if you're, and I do have a question, if that was the presentation that you're going to come up with, just, well, I'm coming from the Orthodox Church argument here, and I accept that, and I understand that the Orthodox Church is very clear. I can show you that they do not ever acknowledge or permit polygyny, but what they do allow people to marry up to 3 different times, you know, and that's a form of serial monogamy, which we could actually even call soft polygyny, you know, in a sense. So although they still don't practice one wife till, you know, for life, they do allow remarriage. And when we come to the divorce, there's a lot more reasons for that they allow for divorce than the Bible does. And that's a big question mark for me. So I try to be understanding on where the position is. Because if you say, well, the church said this about this, then I'm like, okay, great. But then why are they saying something completely different than what Jesus and Paul says over here about this other thing? And you're saying, well, I'm going to stick to what the church says. Well, then I would say the church is even wrong at this point, though, right? So then I can't be consistent with the church.
Yes, I think consistency is extremely important. I do want to ask you a question. Are you done with your points so far?
Yes, I'm good.
Good. Now we can begin. Crack my knuckles.
We'll get to the divorce part, because that will come up, because you did say you're going to use the church's position. So I will bring that up later.
No, we kind of went through that. The church's position on governing bodies and us respecting the law. You've already conceded that. So we're going to move on to this right now.
But the divorce element, because that is a point of
there's also that too, but it's like even that wasn't like fully fleshed out. You can't say yes, yay or nay, because it's like they don't specify what kind of marriage this is. Like they don't specify what you're divorcing from. We'll get back to that, but here's the thing though. Like, so I don't know if you can follow me on this, but go to Leviticus 18:18 if you can.
Absolutely, I'll pull it up for you.
Give me 1 second. Hold on real quick.
Yep.
While you're pulling that.
Leviticus 18:18. I was gonna say, you better not have phoned a friend. I was like, did you phone a friend? Because I didn't get that element.
No, I had a phone call. So I was supposed to meet somebody at 9:30, and I'm like, I was like, this ain't gonna take long. So here's the thing, though. When we look at this, it's understood, right? While the verse specifically prohibits marrying a woman and her sister's rivals, but the first wife is still alive, the language could be used to interpret in the extension to a general prohibition of polygyny. So here's the thing, though, is like if we look at this, the verse is often understood to specifically forbid marrying a woman and her sister at the time. We could say this, right? But if we're talking about this, the interpretation is extremely important. When they talked about sister at the time, they weren't talking about blood sister. Some scholars can argue that the phrase of woman and her sister could be interpreted as one in addition to another. So implying a general prohibition of polygyny. So the Bible does speak against this.
But there's other commentators I could also bring up on my logos that says that is specifically talking about blood relatives. So I don't think that there's a definitive position on that. And I think that would be, we're practicing hermeneutics and understanding the language and the context and who they were talking to at the time, because that just using one scripture, I don't like doing that, because you need to look at what was said before, what was said after.
Can you agree with me on one thing? Does it talk about sexual prohibition?
It says, do not take your wife's sister as another wife. Yes, it says, do not take your wife's sister. Yes.
Right. Do you think that this was common knowledge for them to say blood all the time? Do you think that this is a definitive example of just blood?
I am looking at this exactly what's in front of me, and it says sister. I am not going to assume that it means anything else, or I'm just going to play safe and be like, I'm looking at it for what it says and not trying to put my own opinion on it. So I'm just saying this is what it says.
Glenn, let's say a scripture says, do not harm one another as you do your brother, or do not harm a stranger, or do not harm your brother. Do unto others as you would do unto your brother. Do you think they're talking about blood relatives in this sense that I just stated? Do not harm another as you would your brother. We could say that that's family. There's so many different linguistic places. Well, we're talking about interpretation here.
Again, context is important, right? Because we do know that when they were talking about that, they could be either brother, but we do know, generally speaking, they were talking about fellow believer, another brother in Christ. Okay, so that would be one. They would have to be a believer to be considered a brother. If they were not a believer, they were not your brother.
Do you think that sister could be transposed the same way?
Not necessarily in this context, because of
sister and brothers are different.
Well, in this
Bible reference.
Here's why I'll say it would be considered different, because this is Old Testament. There's not the formation of the church, and they were not referencing them as brother and sister. Right then, back then in this Old Testament, they were referencing each other as brother and sister, as in relation, because in Leviticus, there's laws that are don't take your brother's wife or your dad's wife. Don't sleep with your dad's wife. Don't sleep with your dad's. There's a whole list of very specific, relation to people.
Yes, there's a
right?
specific.
So with that foreknowledge, knowing that this also could be very much in that same vein. So I'm not going to assume that he's going further than that when I know that the previous passages were addressing those matters.
Well, that's the thing, though. It's important for context. And I mean, so if I go to the Orthodox Church's teachings, when they talk about your sister, we're not talking about like blood sister. And that's the thing that we reference there. And it just depends. That's why I think that if you look underneath Luther in Christianity was fractioning off into like all these pieces. Now you have different interpretations. Now you have like you have Mormons that are saying we are just going to create these polygamous environments and things like this. So, and they even call themselves Christians. So it's like, we would even disagree with them. So it's like absolutely. For you to say this, it's like you might as well accept everything else, right? Which is crazy.
No, actually, no, because again, because when you're practicing hermeneutics, one, you have to know who the author is, right, and what they write. Who is their audience? Who are they writing to? What is the context? What is going on during that time, right? So it's almost like this: if I wrote you a letter, right, that said, "I'm excited that Christmas is coming," right, and I sent you the letter, you got the letter, but then you lost the letter, and it was buried for like 1,000 years, 2,000 years, and then somebody digs up this letter and they find it, and they're like, this says that Christmas is coming, and they're like, holy shit, they don't know what Christmas is. They're freaked out. They don't know what to expect because they don't understand.
Christmas is coming.
Yeah, Christmas is. Who the hell is this? They don't understand, and so they are taking the message incorrectly because they don't have the knowledge of the context of the time, what the relation to the author and the reader. And I think that's also very important when studying hermeneutics and trying to interpret any scripture. We can't, I think it's exegesis anything by putting our own things into it. We need to really try to practice exegesis, which was really just only taking what is there and not trying to add more to it. And that's why I think it's safer.
So one of the things you brought up as far as like clergy and deacons, I think when we could talk about kings, Deuteronomy 17:17 references it as evil, even for kings. So even if we look at this, the Old Testament's pretty clear on that.
Too many wives.
I mean, it just depends. It's a key passage, and so we can go Old Testament, and even
have to
obey the law.
But so okay, with that passage, I do want to point out that passage when it says kings not to take too many horses and not to have too many wives. One, we're talking about idolatry there. For one, that's really what that they're referencing. Yes,
it's also materialism because we're turning
it
women
is.
into
That would be idolatry. You're idolizing them. You're idolizing the vanity of acquiring all this stuff, unnecessary stuff that really is going to be distracting and straying you away.
I'm so glad you brought this up, Glenn. Do you think that a second wife would be unnecessary?
Depending on what is going on in that current time in that society
today,
it can be no, it's unnecessary. And I already conceded that. But again, claiming something is a sin.
No, it said evil. Says evil.
No.
But what
that's
is
if
sin?
a king. Hold on. If a king takes too many wives, and the word there is too many, and I think the wording is important to also acknowledge. It doesn't say it's evil if a king takes more than one wife. No, it says it's evil if a king takes too many wives.
Hold on. Well, I'll ask you a question, and this is like outside of the Bible. We're just going to use simple logic. Do you think one wife would be too many? Besides, like, let's say in addition to your wife, do you think that would be too many?
For me, yeah, too many headaches. I don't want to keep up with
you.
I don't like the nagging as it is. I just want simple.
We can agree that nowadays, even financially, even with the governing law against polygyny, it's like even with that, we can say specifically it's too many by the law standards. Even by your own admission, you're saying it's too many. But when we look at the biblical passage, it calls it evil.
No. Again, too many wives. It says it's evil. Now that's my personal standard. Is 1, 2. It may be too many.
But this
for
would
me.
also be the law standard. This
True,
would also not be the standard.
But I want you to point out the question that you asked me,
another wife.
But you asked me a question. But you asked me specifically what my opinion was. If more than one wife.
I did ask you that.
So I want to say that's my stance. Now there could be somebody that says, you know what, I think I can handle 2 wives or 3 wives. And I also want to point out when they did take multiple wives, it was a duty. Okay, the brother died without giving his wife an heir. And then the brother would have to do the deed.
You're talking about special, specific, rare circumstances. I agree. I'll even grant you that, Glenn.
It was a duty thing. It was a duty thing. So then it wasn't a sin then either. What was a sin though was when dude decided that he wasn't gonna, fulfill the thing and he spilled his seed. Right? God punished him for that. It wasn't the fact that he was taking on this woman in, right? And we have no historical context whether or not he was previously married or not, but we can assume that he could have been also married or he couldn't have not been married. He still would have been instructed culturally as the brother to help fulfill. If there was no single male in the family to take her as a wife, it was going to be the brother's duty to take that woman as a second wife. If that was,
I'll even grant you that. I'll even give you that. I'll grant you that. I'll say yes, or under specific circumstances, this can happen. If there was like only 2 men on the planet and there's like 500 women left and we're going to have some massive extinction
I don't want to do that. That's the hell.
I'm just telling you, underneath some external, because here's the thing though, testosterone's plummeting right now. We have people with the same testosterone level as 70-year-olds back in our grandfather's time. So it's plummeting because of plastics and other stuff. But it's like, I can very well see this as a possibility with some eugenics program and I know I have my tinfoil hat on, but it's like, this is like a systematic thing because I guarantee Monsanto's probably a part of this. Plastics, we're taking drugs and testosterone injections, deleting our own production. And it's like we're becoming feminized as a society. I could see where societal norms could lean towards where we have our sperm productions decreasing. Men are becoming less productive as far as this, of the birth rates plummeting. So I do think that there's a mass extinction event that's happening. If you look at statistics somewhere in a place.
I agree with you 100%. And
so I'm not
everything
speaking
that we put on our
in
body.
hyperbolics. We could have a situation where it's like we need to repopulate society. We're going to die if we don't produce with all these women. I can understand where a governing body can come in, where that's why I had to ask you a question. Would the church condone this or say, hey, we need to do this because we're dying?
I don't think that the church would condemn it, is what I'm saying. I think that they would stick to so they wouldn't promote it, is what you're saying. They would not promote it, but they would not condemn it. They probably would even still marry the people because that's going to be their parishioners. If the parishioners are like, we need to repopulate,
Do you think they would marry? Do you think they would go out of their way and just marry these people, and say, I'm going to marry an additional wife to you?
No, I think there would still be a requirement and a standard that has to be met first. So and one, historically, here's the funny thing, historically, and I think it's even in Augustine's writing, he talks about how the addition of a second wife or another wife was always instructed by the first wife. The wife would bring the husband another woman. It wasn't the husband going out and acquiring another wife. So when you asked me the last time, it would be adultery in this sense, right? And I'm saying, and I didn't have the answer for you in that moment, because I'm like, well, no, because they would just marry someone else. I did do the research historically in Augustine's writing on the good of marriage. He talks about in chapter 15, he points out how culturally at that time, if a man had another wife, it was due to the wife bringing him another woman, and she was the one that saying, here, we're doing this, so that they could have more heirs and more lineage of the family, right? So that's how even Augustine said that it was not done for lust.
You're
it was
talking about repopulating society. But when you say things like it was done for duty, it's like we could say this about regular marriage. The only reason why we get married is because we're going to adhere to duty, function, and create a structure for society, so that way our kids can adhere to create better progeny. So that's what I'm saying is that, like, I don't think it was like a really big thing when you brought up, well, we're doing we're adding an extra wife because of duty. I'm like, it's already duty anyways, bro.
I think it's the duty like, for example, when the girls were fighting, right? Leah, the ugly one, because she had the fucked up eye. It says so in the Bible, I promise you. I think she was cross-eyed. But Rachel, the pretty one, right? They were fighting. And this is the first point I made this, and I said this is against polygyny. All right, I'm giving you this. I was like, this is the first time we see a man getting pimped out over mandrakes by his wives. Okay, Rachel pimped him out over some mandrakes from Leah's son, right? But what we see here in this whole thing, that this is confusion, this conflict, right? There's this cattiness, and what we could say is that yes, more women, more problems. Reason why I would also say that it says in the New Testament it has to be a husband of one wife, because we see Jacob here. Dude has a lot on his hands. There's no way that he could be a leader of a church, an elder, and fulfill his duty to all of his wives and kids, and also minister in the church. There's not enough hours in the day. So I could agree with you here, but we could also thank you for agreeing with me in the sense that in a dire situation that we could see it perceivable that we would see people practicing polygyny if we got population decrease or whatever, and it was necessity for our survival. We would probably see that ban lifted for a period of time legally, and the church probably accepting that due to the circumstances, but not promoting it. They just won't condemn it.
So Glenn, I'm going to ask you a quick question real quick. I just want to kind of go the logic train with you. So right now, do you think that like in society, 2025, August 2nd at 9:31 AZ time, whatever, right? We are right now. Do you think that it would increase sin or decrease sin if we added polygyny and we said overnight, we're going to have polygynous relationship, we're going to condone it? Let's say the church says we're going to do this. Do you think sin would increase or decrease?
I think that it would be, I think people are already doing it. They're just not doing it so publicly. I think people are already doing it. Public
propagandized culture of this would increase sin or decrease?
I think it would definitely increase in the sense of people. But this is why I would say it would increase, because I think they would try to do it the Andrew Tate way, and the Andrew Tate way is not the way that God gave the structure. Right. Again, I'm going to go back to the structure that God gave them if they were going to practice this thing. Right. So Andrew Tate is not practicing it according to God's structure. He's doing it his way, which that would be sinful. Now, if it was practiced according to the way that God structured it, I think in those cases that would not be sinful if it was necessary. If it's not necessary and it was done for the desire of lust, then that would be sinful.
But Glenn, let's say the government says, hey, we need to just do this, and we're just going to have people more free because we already have OF models. We already have all this. We might as well just, because people are cheating anyways in relationships, we're just going to have polygyny increase. And you've already agreed with me that it's going to increase. So here's why. I can go down the logical entailment and why it increases sin. I think I brought this up the first time we talked. I'm in a marriage and I need to have a second wife. I need to have I'm going to create some infidelity, whether or not it's through text messaging, because I'm going to sex somebody, talk to them. And even if I say, you know what, we're going to just break a covenant to do this, and my wife agrees, because you even said this on the first time we talked. You said, well, if my wife agrees, well, I mean, even if my wife agreed that I could screw another woman and bring her to the relationship, it's creating this. So not only is this creating sin.
Hold on. I want to clarify. When I said that, I was addressing the way that they did it, though. The way that Constantine acknowledged that how they were acquiring the second wife, was because the wife brought it in. So I'm saying, according to even the church, standard here, this was what they was done, and this is how it was deemed acceptable and not considered lust, right? And that's, he was differentiating why it now at the time when he was writing it, it would be considered sinful, and why it was not considered sinful then. So if it was under the same context as he was writing about when it was not sinful, then I would say that would have to still apply today. It would still not be sinful in that sense.
If I was to talk about just the Orthodox Church, do you think the people practicing polygyny, if laws changed overnight and we turned heel, right? Do you think the majority would practice it the way you think they were supposed to do?
Absolutely not. Do you think do people practice marriage the way that they're supposed to do now? No. Okay.
Yeah, people are getting into it. But here's the thing, that actually goes to my whole point. It's like it would actually increase sin. If we created a polygyny society, now all of a sudden we already have examples of this.
I don't think it indefinitely increases sin, or that means that everybody that practices it will be sinning. I do think that it will definitely. Everybody would be sinning in that practice. I don't think. I would almost say that everybody back then was doing it wrong too.
Right. But here's the thing, though, is that we already have examples of polygynous relationship. Let's say Tyrone knocks up somebody else outside of his relationship and then knocks up somebody else. I've literally met women on the dating market that say I have 3 babies' moms. How is she not adding to a polygynous society that people are saying that's not polygyny?
Well, that's what I call soft polygyny. We already have soft polygyny.
Yeah, right? We have this already, but that's sinful.
But that's not the way that God framed it to be.
So hold on. Stay right there. This is what I'm saying. If it's not the way that God, according to you, God's saying this, that's a sin,
it's not
right?
According to me, it's according to the Bible. It's not. The framework is there.
Right. If they're not practicing this kind of polygyny that you're talking about, it's a sin, right?
Yes, just as if you were
polygyny is a sin. The way that we practice it today, by your own statement.
I said by the way that our cultural practice it today. Yes, that is sin. All right, I have no problem admitting that. Right. But if it was practiced in the way, and if it was legalized to do so in the way that God framed it to be done, I don't think anybody could call that a sin.
Glenn, so I'll even give you this. Can you name me one source or one person in society, a celebrity, anybody else? Give me one example where they actually practice this within God's law, according to you.
Nobody. I don't know of anyone. But so I can't give you an example, but I can say that, well, one, there's multiple reasons for that, right? Because one, we have society for the last several years, we have only thought of polygyny as sinful because that's what's been taught. And it's not inherently sinful in the sense of what is being presented, the way that it is being practiced, or the way that it was being addressed was that in any circumstances, polygyny is sinful, right? And that would be dishonest, and that is wrong to misrepresent exactly how it would be sinful. Okay, so I think we have been given a message, a blanketed message that is not accurate and factual according to biblical, scripture or church history in that sense, right?
So here's a question I have. So there's a debate coming up with a Hebrew Israelite and Andrew Wilson.
I know, no Fugazi.
Do you think that this Hebrew Israelite is correct about his polygynous prescription for society?
I don't think polygyny is the solution to anything. If you do not, and here's the reason why. If you do not promote masculinity, if masculinity and patriarchy, ultimately biblical patriarchy, is not being promoted and not being upheld, and men are not being held to the standards of biblical patriarchy, it doesn't matter if you have monogamy, polygyny, or whatever igeny, it will still fail. So polygyny in itself is not a solution, just like monogamy in itself is not a solution. But monogamy practiced under God's created, designed way, and with husband and wife in the positions that God created and designed them to be in, that will work. And we know that historically.
So even if I was being pragmatic right here, I could say that monogamy in itself, even absent anything else, is a better solution than polygyny by itself. I can say it's less problematic, less invoking of sin.
And in our current culture, yes.
Right. Even in this culture, we could say it's less promotion of sin, less, even if you have a monogamous relationship where a guy's sinning and he does all kinds of crazy shit, it's less sinful than a polygamous relationship outside of your quote unquote God's commandment.
Let me think about that, because we do know that a lot of Christian men, that this is self-reported, I think it's 76% of them have reported to be addicted to pornography, and those are ones are in monogamous relationships. So I can't necessarily say there would be more sin per se. I would just say there's probably different sin than what's already being currently done, right?
I would say
I
more
don't know
sin.
if it would be more. I wouldn't know if it necessarily be more. I think
I can tell you how it could be more. Here's how. I'll give you even a hypothetical.
Hold on. Would you think those guys that will be practicing polygyny are going to be watching porn, or are they going to be too busy getting off by their wives? I don't know.
We don't know this, but I'll give you a hypothetical on why it could promote more sin. Let's say that you have a cold bedroom in one relationship. They're already going to be watching porn. Now you have a cold bedroom in one relationship where one person's going to neglect the other person. That's neglect. Now you have two people neglecting instead of one. So it's actually increasing the propensity of sin in this relationship because now they're going ahead behind somebody's back within another relationship. Because think about it. If I got a cold bedroom, I'm not going to wife number one.
Hold on, you said if it was a polygyny that both of them would end up cutting dude off?
No, that's not what I'm saying. Like, let's say if I have a wife, Sandra and Sarah, we're just going to make up names. Sarah doesn't want to sleep with me anymore. Cold bedroom over here. Now I'm going to sleep with Sarah. But it's like now that Sandra isn't getting attention because she's not fucking me, I'm going with Sarah, but that's going to piss Sandra off. Now I'm creating more issues because of this. That's twice the issues that I have because it's like, because one person is creating an injustice, I'm going to add on to the injustice with one person, create jealousy possibly. And then not to mention that, but I may have to lie to sleep with Sarah, even though it's permitted in my relationship. That's going to create distrust, more resentfulness in this relationship. You're just creating more issues.
I can agree. I can agree with you that there could be created more issues, but I can't go along the line of like all of that with you, like because I don't know why you would be lying to sleep with your other wife, which you owe her the marital right.
You lied in one relationship enough already to watching porn.
I'm just saying,
increase the propensity of this.
But if you are by your duties to your other wife, you owe her that. That's a duty that you owe her. I don't know why you would lie about the duty that you need to do.
People could the reason why I say that, and it's a really good example, is because men lie about watching porn behind their wife's back.
Because they don't have spines. They don't have spines.
I'm just telling you, this already happens, but it's going to happen twofold with two people.
I could at least concede to you this, that I could see that it definitely will be more problematic. And it does more pussy, more problems. Okay, we could agree to that. Just like more money, more problems. As soon as you start chasing the money starts running. As soon as you start chasing it starts running, right? So as soon as you idolize or you prioritize this thing or anything, you putting it above God, it's going to be problematic. I agree with you on that. I have no problem with that. But to say said thing is inherently and outright a sin, I can't say that. I can say yes, it's a slippery slope and it can lead you to sin quicker.
Glenn, you contradicted yourself. You just said
no. I didn't say it was a sin.
And a governing body says something and we uphold to it, we're not creating sin because we're obeying the law.
Yes, but if that situation, if the law was no longer the same, right? Just like gay marriage was outlawed. And now
that's a what if scenario. We're talking about now. You're saying that now it's a sin. So you already conceded the whole argument.
Yes. But you gave a hypothetical, and I'm giving you also a hypothetical how it could also not be inherently a sin.
I'll even agree with that. I'll say on the what if scenario, you'd be right. But right now, it's a sin.
Yes. And I had no
Correct.
problem saying that.
Okay.
I agreed to
Gotcha.
that under our current laws structure, it would be a sin for anybody to practice that. Yes.
So the reason why it's a sin during this law structure of us obeying their law is because of biblical law back in the day and their guidance, hence meaning that it is a sin in the Bible.
No. What is the sin in the Bible?
Right?
Hold on, let's clarify. What is sin in the Bible is to disobey the laws of the land. That is the sin. That would be the sin in the Bible that we would be referencing.
Right.
Not actually.
So
but hold on.
polygyny is a sin in the Bible.
No. Let's clarify. That you're doing. I know what you're trying to do, and I'm not going to give you that. I'm not going to give you that because it's not. Here. No. If the law, if Roman law at that time did not outlaw polygyny, right? You cannot have that argument.
But you've also agreed that the church wouldn't fight to promote it.
Exactly. They wouldn't fight to promote it, but they wouldn't condemn it. And condemnation is what I'm concerned about. Is this thing a sin? And are we calling people who are practicing this thing or who are thinking that this is a good thing or something that or agrees to this? Are we saying that you are a sinner for thinking this or, believing this when there's no scripture that actually states that? And I think that would be sinning in itself. And
marrying your sister, and that's the thing.
That is weird. Don't marry your sister.
I don't think they were talking about blood sister when they talked about this.
I think that they're pretty much talking about that because, in Leviticus, he goes through the whole thing. Don't marry this person. Don't marry your cousin's, second this or your uncle's this. Don't bang your aunt. Don't lay with the man as you would with the woman because that's an abomination. No. They were very specific on do not do these things during that time frame in that context of that writing of the law. And I think that we have to acknowledge that and say that we know that they were being very specific in the relationships that they're referring to there. It is safe to assume that they were also referring to the very specific relationships that is stated in this passage as well. And I think that's a safe position to state without trying to, reach too far. And I like to play it safe. You're muted, bro. You're muted. But I can't hear you. You're muted. You're muted.
I don't think they were talking about sisters as far as like blood or even in-laws. I don't think they were talking about in-laws when they were saying that.
Okay, so then can you help me understand then why is the Bible so contradictory then? Because we see if you're pointing out in Deuteronomy it said this.
Contradictory because it's self-referencing.
Let me point out why it would be contradictory. If you're saying this right here is telling you that this is polygyny is a sin here, but then let's fast forward to Deuteronomy 21. Now we've seen God give us structure if you're going to do this thing that he, according to you, was already said as a sin. So then why would God give us structure for sinning? That doesn't make sense to me, right? That doesn't logically connect. And here's another thing. If God called David righteous, right? David was a practicing polygynist. So, and God gave David wives. So how can David be habitually sinning, living in sin, and God still call him righteous if he is not repented of this said sin? That, and do you see how that is confusing?
Yeah, I can understand how that can be confusing. And that's the thing though, is like the other reason why, and I'll be completely honest with you, I'm not the exact person that you need to come to as far as interpreting scripture. That's why I just wanted to have a conversation. And also that's why we have to ask for.
I have an appointment to talk to Father Josiah out in Riverside, by the way.
So that's the thing, though. It's like, I think it's a really good position for us to be in to ask and inquire church authority on this. So when we ever get into a crux like this, that's why I didn't want to do this on Sarah's channel, because now it's like I have way more people. The ortho brothers are coming from my head, and it's like I've misinterpreted something. And that's why I'm not going to go further than I need to, as far as like me saying, well, this is the absolute authority on anything. That's why I think that's sometimes a conversation is needed. I think that if we went to Sarah's channel, we
wouldn't. And I think what we're pointing out even now is that I don't think neither one of us can say beyond a doubt of proof, or beyond what I'm trying to say, reasonable doubt, that we could say for a fact, 100% fact, that we know that this thing is either a sin or not a sin. But what we do know that it does not say that it is a sin, verbatim or explicitly.
I think that it hints that it's a sin. I think when they talk about the sisters and do not take another sister, they're talking about another woman.
It causes problems. I think if anything, you can look at the Bible as best practices, right? If you want to live a good life, whether
best practices for sure.
Yeah. So and even atheists will tell you, you know what, the Bible. If you want to live a good life, read the Bible, follow the Bible, right? Just they don't accept the spirituality of it and the divinity of it. That's fine, but they will say that if you want to live a good life, then read the Bible, right? So you could say that the Bible is good for best practices, right? And God's saying, hey, the best practice that would be best for your life, right, is not to complicate it more than necessary. And if you can avoid having multiple wives, then that would be better for you because it's going to give you less headache and less issues. That's common sense, right? But I think what we do see is that there are times where, for the sake of the family and honoring the family, right, you may have to take your wife and fulfill this, thing with her as for your brother's sake, to continue the name and of your brother's name in Israel history, right? We understand that this was a thing during that time, specifically right there, that context. But
Glenn, I have a question. Was this a singular incident that you saw in the Bible, or was this like, hey, we need?
No. This was like if your brother died and he did not give his wife, like I'll find the exact scripture. But
no, I know what you're talking about. I'm just asking you if you know.
No, I think this was basically a standard of practice, right? Because she is to go to
during that time, it was cultural.
Yeah. She was to go to the elders at the city gates if you did not agree or fulfill the brother-in-law duty, right? And give her an heir for your brother's name to continue on in Israel. Then she's to go to the elders in the city gates and then bring you in front of them, and then they are going to question you on it. And then if something like you disagree, then like there's a punishment. I think she like steps on your dick or something. I don't know.
You're talking about laws at the time, cultural, and you're talking about governing authorities.
Yeah, and so what I'm pointing out here is that we see that there's instances, and we could say it's conceivable that we may find our future generations may find themselves in a predicament or in a situation where polygyny may be practiced, and it's not going to be condemned due to whatever catastrophe that they're recovering from. And because God doesn't explicitly state that it's a sin, as he does all the other sins that are very clear, it's safe to assume that it is not considered a sin inherently, but maybe the way that the people practice it will be sinful if they don't do it under the right context and the right in the confine of the right structure, right? So that's why
that's the thing, though. My whole argument was that it is a sin. We didn't talk about like whether or not it was a sin at the time or not a sin at the time. I'm just saying that it is a sin. So we've already acknowledged that it's a sin now.
No, we acknowledge that it's a sin now under the certain current structure of our laws. Now,
via what?
Via what the Bible says, obey the laws of the land. So that right there, so yes.
Even then, supports that it's a sin. Even now,
if the laws of the land did not condemn or outlaw polygyny, then you would not have that position. And as like we mentioned earlier, laws do change. They have changed. We have made gay marriage a thing when that was never a thing. So it's conceivable. Hold on, it's conceivable to assume that potentially there may be a time that the laws will change and allow polygyny, and therefore you could not consider it no longer a sin.
So, Glenn, I'm going to ask you this question. Under right now, 2025,
yes,
is it a sin in the Bible according to the law? It's a sin in the Bible.
It would be a sin according to what it says in Romans to obey the laws of the land, but not to say it's a sin because it doesn't say polygyny is a sin. Okay, I want to be very distinct in that.
Polygyny happens to be something alongside the law that the law is against.
Yes,
so
but again, we are. But
people say that polygyny is a sin because of that.
What we're saying is that okay, bestiality is a sin, right? Do we need the laws of the land to say that it's a sin?
Of course, nobody would disagree.
Okay, what about adultery? What about adultery?
Nobody would disagree with you then. It says it in the Bible.
Okay, I know it does. That's what I'm pointing out. But it doesn't say
Twice, actually.
polygyny.
It says it twice.
I know, but it doesn't say polygyny ever is a sin. So we're talking about two different things here. All right. So we know that these things, bestiality, adultery, infidelity, fornication, right? All that is a sin because God told us it's a sin. Very clear as day. Homosexuality, sin, clear as day.
Glenn,
We don't
Glenn,
have
I have a question for you.
Sin,
I have a
clear as day.
I'm going to use logical entailment for you real quick. If I take somebody's cow and I have it in my yard, is it a sin to have a cow?
Well, actually, you have coveted something that doesn't belong to you. You said you have taken somebody's cow.
Hold on. I'll just even ask you a simple question. Is it a sin to own a cow?
No, it's not a sin to own a cow.
Not a sin. What if that cow was stolen? Is it a sin to steal the cow?
Well, that would be coveting that cow.
Right. So, hold on. Is it a sin to have a wife?
No, it's not a sin to have a wife.
Is it a sin to go outside of my covenant to get a wife?
Going out of your covenant to get a wife? Yes, because there's actually a structure on how the second wife was to be brought in to the marriage. If you were going to,
just like there's a structure for me to get a cow to purchase it legally and do all this other stuff. It's not right.
But there are
standards. Relationship, you would need to sin to create this relationship.
No. Yes, in 2025 with the laws right now, I already conceded that. But what I'm getting at is that overall, you cannot say that the Bible says polygyny is a sin inherently. Okay, because that would mean it would have been a sin back then. It would have to be a sin in the future because God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And we do not see any condemnation. We do not see any rebuke. Wait,
hold on. Leviticus states this. How can we not reconcile? Even you and me have an interpretation, a translational issue, because that's where you're hung up on. We can't get past that point.
No, because in Leviticus, there's two points where it talks. Oh, I'm sorry. There's 2 points in Deuteronomy where it talks about polygyny or polygynism, right? He says, do not take too many wives, right?
No, do not take a sister after your wife.
Your sister's wife. Do not take your sister's wife. Again, if you
your
read
sister's wife?
Yes.
Women
it says,
can't marry other women in the Bible. That's crazy.
Got it backwards. It said, don't take your wife's sister. Don't take your wife's sister while she's living. So you can still take your wife's sister. You just gotta wait till she's dead, for one.
It says... So here's the thing, a woman to her sister. That's what it says. One in addition to another. It's
all right, I'm gonna pull out.
Woman.
Hold on.
That's what it's talking about, bro.
Hold on, I got you right here. I'm gonna pull out Orthodox Bible
let's
here.
do it, bro.
All right, I'm gonna help.
So to me, that's my ultimate refutation right there.
I think that is interpreted as sister, as in biological, because if you're gonna say that to mean something different, you would have to reference
incest. It's saying to not promote incest. No. I don't think it's talking about that.
No, I don't think he's talking about incest. I'm saying that I think he's saying that do not to take your wife's sister, meaning
Leviticus says you should not marry a woman as a rival to her sister.
Do not take. It says this translation right here says do not take your wife's sister as a rival wife and have sexual relations with her while your wife is living. That's what it says. Is
that the Orthodox Bible you're using or what?
No. I'm just reading off the one on the screen here. Or is it not showing? This is
the one I'm showing says you shall not marry a woman as a rival to her sister.
I'm getting to the Leviticus right now in the Orthodox Bible.
Because it says you should not, because that doesn't say anything at all. What my verse says, you should not marry a woman as a rival to her sister.
What does it say right there? You see it on the screen?
Do not take your wife's sister as a rival wife. But to me, that can translate to another woman. In reference to the Bible, I don't think that they were talking about sisters.
And I can say, okay, you can believe that all you want. I think it's safer to assume that they mean biologically. They're talking a biological sister, because if you go previous scriptures before,
I don't think they're. I don't translate it that way. But that's where we're going to be stuck at. Well, so here's the thing. This is the reason why I wanted to have this conversation.
How would you practice good hermeneutics? Don't you have to understand the context of what's being said and not just use one scripture as a reference?
I'm so glad you brought that up. What I would do is I would go to church authority and talk to church authority.
Sure, you can do that, but there's also another way.
And translate it for me.
But wouldn't they say there's actually another way you could actually understand what is being referenced here? And that would be just kind of using common sense, because I mean, I wouldn't start at verse 18. I probably would go
prior. The problem that we got into is that whenever you talk about church translation, you can go outside of this, and then after Luther, you're talking about this is how you have Mormonism now and all their translations.
I'm not doing that. I'm not talking about that at all. I'm actually saying, okay, if I want to know what was mentioned before verse 18, I should probably read verse 17, or maybe go to verse 15 and read a little bit.
You're talking about continuity. You're talking about reading the whole.
So then you have a better understanding exactly what is being addressed, and you can see if they're actually really talking about someone's sister, the wife's sister, or if it's something could be interpreted as something else, as you were referencing. I think that would be an easier way to gain more clarity if there's confusion before going to the church authority. I think that's something that's kind of common sense. Wouldn't you agree?
I mean, I would go to church authority if there's any confusion. I wouldn't say if I'm confused, I'd just have my own interpretation, then go to church authority.
Yeah, but if you're like, I'm not really sure if this actually means sister, or like just another woman. Let me read what the previous scriptures were saying. Can give me more context and what is actually being said.
It says it focuses on the prohibition of eating food, the proper way to slaughter animals, and the use of blood for atonement, outlining various moral and ritual laws. So when we're talking about this, we're talking about
not exactly. Hold on, I got it right here. You want me to read the Orthodox Bible?
Idolatry, dishonoring parents, and sexual immorality.
Yes,
so go ahead, read off
what is sexual immorality translated to? The original term, it means to prostitute, right? To sell. So,
well, that's one interpretation for sure.
Well, that was actually the original Keon Greek translation of that, or the Hebrew translation of that, I should say. So, the sexual immorality has become an umbrella term for a lot of things that was not originally considered, to be sexual immorality. They had other words for it, like bestiality, homosexuality, adultery. Right, those were all individual things, but all those things are sexual immorality, being sexually immoral. We would agree, right? I would even say not having sex in a marriage, like if your wife is denying you, as it says not to do in 1 Corinthians 7, would be considered even. That would be sexually immoral.
This is tangential to the topic, and we're talking about we're agreeing on this, like being gay and having homosexual relations, being a genetic dead end, trans, all this other stuff. It's all like in alignment with what we're talking about. I think that when you talk about sexual immorality, it is an umbrella term. But when we're referring to sexual immorality as far as this, I don't think they're talking about incest, and I don't think they're talking about banging sister-in-laws.
I think what they're talking about when it says there in sexual immorality, they're referring prostitution. To sell, because that's what was the original translation of sexual immorality.
Well, you just said it's an umbrella term that could be used for.
Yes, it has been turned into an umbrella term over time to cover adultery, bestiality, homosexuality, those things, right? And fornication would fall under that. Those all things would be sexually immoral, because sex is only allowed in the confines of a marriage, right? So that's the only place that it is not considered immoral. So any type of sex outside of that would be considered immoral, or not having sex in that type of relationship by denying your spouse for any other reason other than what was stated in 1 Corinthians 7:1 would be considered sexually immoral. So I'm just saying that. But here we go back in Leviticus 18, right? It says, I'm gonna start from verse 11. Okay.
Wait, can I ask you a question, Glenn?
Well, hold on. I want to get to this because I think this is important before we go.
All right, go ahead.
Okay. In verse 11, 18 verse 11 says, the nakedness of your father's wife, your sister, you shall not uncover her nakedness. You shall not uncover the nakedness of your father's sister. She is near of kin to your father. You shall not uncover the nakedness of your mother's sister, for she is near of kin to your mother. You shall not uncover the nakedness of your father's brother, that's gay, and approach him and approach his wife. She is your aunt. You shall not uncover the nakedness of your daughter-in-law. She is your son's wife. You shall not uncover her nakedness. You shall not uncover the nakedness of your brother's wife. It's your brother's nakedness. You shall not uncover the nakedness of a woman and her daughter, nor shall you take her son's daughter or her daughter's daughter to uncover naked or their nakedness. And then it says, they are near of kin to her. It is impious. Nor shall you, then here's verse 18, nor shall you take a woman as a rival to her sister to uncover her nakedness while the other is living. So here we go.
A woman is a rival to her sister. Go ahead.
Hold on. Nor shall you take a woman as a rival to her sister. That means the woman that you already married is the woman's sister. You don't take a woman as a rival to her sister. Why was every other distinction of the relationship very clear and specified? Do not take your uncle's wife, that's your aunt. Do not take your brother's wife, that's your brother's nakedness. It's very detailed and explicitly stated the relationship.
I'll even walk with you. Let's say I grant you all this. Let's say I grant you that they're saying it's against, all this other stuff. But let's say that somebody does do this. If I'm in a relations with my mother's sister or any of the other stuff they talked about, and let's say I did have this marriage, would that be a polygyny? Would that be polygyny that I created?
What? You getting with your mom's sister? No, that's nasty.
Or any of these other relationships that it talked about, spoke against, right? Would that be a polygynous relationship?
Were you married with someone else?
No, that it talked about saying not to do.
No, because they're, again, if you bang your dad's wife,
so
you're not in a polygynous relationship. Hold on. If you bang your dad's wife, you're not committing polygyny. You are actually an adulterer because you're not married.
But if I have
those two are married, the relationship is not. That's different. Adultery is very, come on, we got to be very clear with our definitions. Adultery is having sex outside the marriage. Now, original definition of adultery is a woman having sex outside the marriage. We know that. That's actually the original.
What's your definition of marriage in the Bible?
Well, it would be a covenant, right? I would refer back to.
How do you have this covenant in the Bible?
Well, you have a man and a woman. Well, the families. Yes, but also King David also had many wives, and he had a man and a woman. Again, we could go back to polygynous examples of how they acquired wives.
Right.
And God.
Hold on real quick. But you didn't answer my question. How do you have a marriage in the Bible? How do you have this marriage? What needs to happen for this marriage to be?
Well, there's rituals, right? So you have the marriage covenant, right? That's the vows, the
what
promise.
Would that be? So just vows. It's just
no,
vows?
it's not. It's not just vows, right? It's this commitment to one another in the eyes of God and also the family, right? And the best example of it is like the blood, the way that they used to do it with Abraham. God put Abraham in this days, and God fulfilled both ends of the covenant. That would be the perfect example of what a marriage covenant was back then. There was like a killing of like animals, or the sacrifice, and they were walking through the blood. I want to say like path or whatever, and that resembled this bonding. I don't recall exactly all the details, but there was a very defined and detailed ceremonial process, and then it was done in the eyes of the public, right? And under the eyes of God, there was some type of authority, whether if it was the church authority, but they didn't necessarily have a church authority back in Old Testament. They probably had a judge, or a prophet was overseeing it. I'm not really sure.
So Glenn,
but there was still a process.
Says, do not take your wife's sister as a rival wife. What if I did take my sister's? What if I did take my wife's sister as a rival wife? Would that be a polygynous relationship?
Yes, it would still be under as a definition.
Would you not say this is a sin if I did this?
Yes, that in that context. But hold on, in that context, yes, it would be a sin because you are not doing it according to the structure that God gave you. Again, it all comes back to structure. Okay, it's like this: if you have sex, is that a sin?
Outside of the covenant of marriage, yes.
Oh, so there's a structure. There's a framework on how you could actually practice this thing and enjoy this thing and it not be a sin. Holy crap.
Do you think that does polygyny have a structure?
Actually, it does God gives us a structure. We see that already.
Okay, great. But it's saying that this structure right here of polygyny is a sin.
No, it's not. It's
Literally
saying,
leading to this.
it's saying in this framework, yes, if you do it this way, because this is not the way that God instructs you to do so. Again, it's
Can you
all
tell
about
me how God instructs you to do so?
Yes, it says again in we'll go back to
As a
Deuteronomy.
prescription for society. I need to see a prescription for society.
I'm going to give you exactly how God said if one is going to practice polygyny, this is how they should do it. That would be a prescription to society. He's saying, hey, if you're going to do it this way. He could have condemned it. He could have said that would be blasphemous. That would be wrong, but he does not. He said, if they're going to do it, they do it this way. So that right there is a structure and a guideline, not a condemnation.
If we were doing a debate right now, I've already proven that even this is a sin, polygyny, and it's just a game of semantics where it's like, what kind of polygyny is a sin? But we've already agreed that it is a sin if we do it the wrong way, according to you. But it's like,
well, if you do anything the wrong way, it could be a sin, right?
I mean, yeah, I'll grant you that.
Okay, so.
But it doesn't disprove my argument at all. I'm just saying.
It also doesn't disprove my argument either.
You see why I didn't want to
you've even conceded multiple times tonight that you're.
Yeah, I don't mind.
I can give you that. I can give you that. So then you haven't
But you also haven't either, Glenn. But Glenn, there's been many debates that I've had plenty of debates where I've had to concede certain points just so I could fucking win the debate.
So I conceded. I gave you concessions too, but I also clarified how I gave you the concession under the framework of how you would frame the concession to be not a blanket concession either.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to be clear by that. Also, I wanted to show you something because I want you to watch this video. I'm not sure if you have heard of Joel Webbin. I'm sure you've seen him on X, Pastor Joel Webbin from Right Response Ministries. He's pretty
I
triggering.
haven't seen him. I don't know who he is.
I think you might like him just if you watch some of his videos because he calls out the church for feminism.
I know exactly who that is.
Huh?
I know who Josiah Trenum is.
Yeah, I know. I actually have reached out to Josiah, and I'm waiting to hear back to actually set up going out there to Riverside. So I'm going to show you this picture. This is a conversation that I had last week with Pastor Joel Webbin from Right Response Ministries. He also has a YouTube channel. He does a lot of streams on there. He's very well known for calling out feminism and all the wokeness in the church. I was watching this video at 4 a.m. that he released about polygyny because he was talking about the Andrew Tate and the Matt Walsh debate on polygyny on X. And they were referring to that whole debacle. And then they're like, let's break it down. Is it a sin? Is it not a sin? What has been historically the biblical or the church historical understanding of polygyny? Why was it considered a permittable in the Old Testament? And now we're told that it's a sin now. So all that stuff, right? And this is a response to me because I sent him a message because we're friends. And I said, pretty much gave him the whole rundown that I've given you tonight. He goes, yes, that's pretty much the answer we gave. We acknowledge that there could be conceivably be context where it is permissible. So if something is a sin, it's never permissible. Okay, we know homosexuality will never be permissible because God clearly states it as an abomination and it's a sin.
No, that doesn't make any sense. Here's why. So here's the thing though, unjust murder is a sin. We could say that, right?
Well, to murder is a sin. Killing is not a sin. Murder is a sin, but to kill is not a sin.
So this is why interpretation is extremely important because right now in the hood, we have people saying, matter of fact, I just put up some content recently. I don't know if you saw it on my page. There was a black person that broke into white woman's house and burglarizing the place. She got an alarm notice and she went in the house. She was armed 2A. I supported all day. She went in the house and there was a confrontation. One shot rang off and he died, right? Now the black community is saying he was unjustly murdered. She murdered him. She didn't have to do this. She could have called 911. It's like you have one interpretation on one side saying he's murdered. On the second, she's saying, well, I have a right to self-defense because I didn't know what he was going to do. He didn't have a weapon, but he charged me.
The definition of murder, again, would be to one, there has to be a malicious intent. And again, that goes to the intent or of the action of doing so, right? So this individual broke into your house. They, as all as you know, they are a threat. They're trespassing. They're not there. You don't have permission to be there. And anybody that doesn't have permission to be there and is going in there in a way that is not normal, not going through your front door, they're breaking through your window or something. It gives you enough justifiable reason to think that this individual is a threat and you need to stand your ground and you have the right to defend yourself and by any means at that point. So
to stop them.
I mean, you could go just logically just do that whole process and say, well, you're retarded to think that it's not murder or not justified. Okay.
I could say I have a right to murder this individual.
I do. I do.
If you
break into my house, no, I have the right to kill you. I have the right to kill you.
Of course you're going to take the language and change it to kill, but in my mind, I have a right to murder somebody. I could say that and still be right.
No, because murder is actually the crime. Murder is the crime, not killing somebody. Again, look at the definition
but if we think
of
about
murder.
it, it's like
it's the unlawful killing. It is the unlawful. So murder is very detailed.
Okay. I'll agree with you on that. Yes.
Okay,
but here's the thing. You've even said it yourself. The law could change. What if polygyny was allowed? And it's like, well, hold on. Well, you just told me that it's a sin to murder somebody. But if we had the purge in America and they said all murder is available in America until 12 and emergency services are suspended, it's like, come on, bro. Like,
then that's where context matters, right? Don't you think context matters?
That's why interpretation is extremely important here.
That's why I think under certain circumstances, we have to see that, this may not be always. Because even Paul writes, all things are good, or all things are available to me, but not all things are good for me, right? So meaning that, I could have two wives, but that may not be good for me. That may actually cause me to sin. So there actually there's wisdom there, right? And understand that all things are available, but maybe all things are not good for that individual. But maybe alcohol may not be good for you, but I don't have a problem with alcohol. I never drink alcohol regularly. So I have no problem going to a bar and hanging out with my friends who are drinking, but maybe you going to a bar with your friends drinking will cause you to sin. That would not be good for you, but it's not necessarily a bad thing for me. So that's why I think there's context and understanding. Is this thing going to cause you to sin? Is it going to lead you to sin? Then I should think you should stay away from it. Now you can say rule of thumb, it's safe to assume that anything that's going to take more time away from you and your devotion to God would be something that you may want to, remove out of your life. But then I could say, well, then don't watch TV, don't play video games, don't go to the gym. Because you know what? All that time in the gym, you're focused on your rep and counts. Are you really focusing on God right now? Do you see how stupid and legalistic people could get with this when they try to take it that far?
The Pharisees, they were so stuck on the law. They were just there was no nuance to anything.
Exactly. And I'm glad you pointed that out, nuance, because that's exactly what I'm pointing out here. There is a lot of nuance here, and it's not black and white and verbatim explicit. We could say, yes, I could say to you, yes, I could see that how throughout the Bible, we see that those that engage in polygyny tend to have a lot of calamities around this dynamic
consequences.
But we also see those that are practicing monogamy also do have calamity around their marriage as well. So,
but you've even agreed with me. You said if people have polygynous relationships, there would be more chances of this happening.
Yes, absolutely. The odds will be you would have potentially more problems. I think that's common sense.
You're saying if I go to the bar and drink, there's more of a chance of me being an alcoholic than not going to the bar.
Exactly. So common sense says you're not going to want to add more problems to your life. I think that's guys have a knack for this. We like to complicate our lives more than necessary. That's why I think there is this, to a degree, this desire or this obsession with polygyny, right? I know guys that think that polygyny will solve their marriage problems. And I don't necessarily think that, because one, you haven't changed the divorce laws. So as long as the marriage laws are currently the same, you're going to get taken by two women for half. And
yeah, but Glenn, even if we have this change, here's the problem with the whole Andrew T thing. The problem with this is when we talk about polygyny, we're pointing to materialism and we're turning women into things and objects and things that need to be maintained. Now, what you've referenced to
not necessarily. I think that's not. I would say maybe in the way of lust.
More often than not.
I would
More
say in the
often
way
than
of
not,
lust. I would say in the way of lust, yes, but in the way of fulfilling a duty, and as it has been stated in the Bible, I don't think that is.
The point still remains. If I take on 2 jobs, which these 2 women would be 2 jobs, I would have more responsibility, more duty, and more hardship in my life.
Yeah,
so it's materialism. Because if I get 2 jobs, what am I now worshiping it sometimes? Because people do this. We can say survival.
I see what you're going down to idolatry thing. I can see where you're going with that.
But there's no way. No, I'm actually going to agree with you. If you have 2 wives, I can see how there's with 2 jobs, it could be like, you could say there's more materialism because you need to buy more shit. But with 2 wives, I don't see how there would be a necessity because you can use 2 jobs to survive because of survivalism. But I don't see 2 women. I need to survive because of 2 women. But there's a massive distinction here.
Again, context and what is going on culturally does play a role. Again, and I think what Augustine points out is it's what's in the heart of the individual that is what was the difference here. They weren't doing polygyny for lustful desire, as in trying to acquire a bunch of women. There was a sense of duty and honor there that they were doing it for. One, like a brother's wife died, or the brother died. He's taking on this responsibility of the family, right? For one. 2, like with David, you took out the king. Well, we can't just like get rid of these women, can't make these women homeless now. These women are now your responsibility. They're under your rule because you are now the king. You're going to take them as wives. So we can actually
understand that. You can see that.
That's why I said there's a sense of duty and a framework that where it is not sinful. And that's what I'm pointing out. It doesn't blatantly say anything is a sin here.
Outside of sin, I'm just going to ask you a question real quick. This isn't like pointing to sin or whatever. I think that we're going to be at this crux where we're talking about taking on a sister's wife and all this. I think there's going to be translation. Huh?
I ain't going to do that. That's no way.
Well, this is what I'm saying, though. I think that we're going to run into this translation issue. This is why I will always appeal to church authority. But this
would you not? Okay, go ahead.
But I lost my train of thought, but go ahead.
I would say that I think we both have come a lot closer in our positions, or at least where we thought we were from the beginning to now, because we both have conceded and we both have conceded how certain contexts is that this thing is not blatantly a sin across the board. And I think that's important to note here, because you have
it's even the same the other way too. We can't say that it's blatantly
I said that.
Across the board.
I know, but we do know certain things are blatantly stated as a sin. And we said earlier in the stream that I think it's safer to say that I'm not going to call something a sin that God has not explicitly called a sin himself, because it does say in the Bible, in Deuteronomy and Revelations, anything added to this document would be a sin in itself. So I'm not going to do that. You could do that if you want. You can take that risk, but I won't do that risk.
Here's my question, though. If we were to have polygyny now, what would be your duty that you would say that it solves in today, 2025?
I don't think that there's I will say here's a ridiculous hypothetical as you presented the hypothetical.
Polygyny
I would say the only
duties
thing
that does it give.
Here is exactly what I think. The only thing that polygyny could solve potentially, right? It does give the opportunity for more children. We already, as you mentioned, that there's a decrease in the birth rate, right? You do see that if you have one wife, you can only get so many kids out of her, right? At any given time. Well, if you have 2, you could double that. So if birth rate is such a crisis, and actually in other countries right now, they're actually incentivizing men, and these are majority is Muslim countries. They're actually incentivizing men to take on second and third wives, and giving them like either a tax break or some type of reward or something, just because their population is decreasing. So let's say that happened in America. Let's say we go to World War III or something, and then half of our male population is dead when, and the war's over and all these women are around. Well, we're going to need to reproduce. We need to, make more men. We need to get more men here. Do you think that we're going to let all those wombs go to waste? No, there's conceivably to see that in that context, under that circumstance, that it's not done for a lustful reason. It's actually done for the sense of duty for the nation or for the people to continue and to be prosperous, right? God said, be fruitful and multiply. In that sense, have dominion over the earth. There's instances where you can see that in those contexts, that is not done from a lustful position of acquiring a bunch of women because you want a bunch of different vagina. You can see that you're doing it for the continuation of the species or your people.
Well, we're going to run into the whole cow problem. That's the thing that I presented. And the reason why I brought that up is like how you get the cow is everything. And you're talking about practices, right? How can you create a polygynous relationship without creating sin to have to do this? Can you explain this to me?
Again, you go back to how God said that if a man was going to take a second wife, what structure was in place. That is, I'm always going to go back to that. If God gave a structure for something, God gave a structure for marriage. You know that,
you said
right?
If God gave a structure?
I said, if God gave a structure for something, that would be the thing that I would go back to. So I'm not giving you my interpretation. I said, if God gave this, as if I said, if God gave a structure for marriage, did he not? Would that not be?
Okay, I'll ask you a question. The church is going to marry a polygynous couple right now. How would they go about doing this without creating any sin?
First of all, for one, I would have to do more diving into church history as I've been doing and understanding how the practice was actually processed and what all the there's a lot of things that took place that had to be met in order for it to not be considered ungodly, right? Or without the blessing of the church, right? There had to be just like marriage. There had to be both of the people have to be believers in order for the church to bless the marriage, right? The union. So just like there are expectations and standards that have to be met, so you're
saying both of them have to be believers, right? I'm not to just interrupt,
I'm using that as an example of the church has a standard on how the marriage could be blessed by the church. Both parties have to be equally yoked, right? They both have to be believers. Right.
But I'm asking you for polygynous example. Can we? We already have this.
I said that.
Can you give me a real example of polygynous marriage?
I don't have right now. I don't have an exact structure or understanding of how the church history has framed it to where it was considered acceptable, because we do know that it was considered acceptable.
So Glenn, if you don't have the structure, in order to obtain the structure, how would we not sin to even get this structure even started anyways?
Just because I don't know the structure doesn't mean that the structure is not there and that we don't have church history to actually show us how the structure was. It just takes me.
In order to get there, how do we not sin to get even to the structure that we're calling to?
That's why I'm doing the research to understand how could this thing not be a sin. So again, you're trying to say that because God never said something is a sin that we could assume something is a sin. And I'm saying I'm
not saying that with this argument. I'm just saying, how would we not sin to get a polygamous relationship? To grant this structure we're supposed to get that's God-given, how are you not going to sin to get this?
First, I'll just use an example of Abraham.
Have to create sin to get this.
I'll point out something. Abraham was given from Sarah, was given Hagar, right? God never rebuked him in that entire process. If he sinned in that process, it would be conceivable that God would be like, "Hey, Abraham, what the fuck you doing, dude?" Right? That's kind of common sense. The type of relationship
God makes mistakes all the time, though. God does. He has a lot of things that he's allowed because you're supposed to learn a lesson in the end.
Very true.
Solomon having all these wives ended up being a consequence and a lesson in the end.
Well, actually, what Solomon did was he actually did not listen to what was said in Leviticus earlier, where it says not to take too many wives. See, Solomon took too many wives. That's why that.
Well, hold on. What's your standard of too many, though, Glenn? What do you have a standard of what's too many?
For me, more than one is too many. Okay,
so how do we not know that this would be a standard in the Bible? One would be too many, right?
No, we have already addressed this earlier. Because that's my opinion, right? So someone else could be like, I think 3 wives is too many, but I think 2 is acceptable, right? But whatever.
We can't even point out a reference in the Bible where it says what the metric for too many is.
Well, we could look at Solomon and be like, I think that's too many, bro.
Yeah, we know what an absolute would be too many, like 50 or 100, 300, things like this. Right? I get that. But where do you start off as too many? Like, there's no metric that you can give me at all. That's
I
the
was
problem.
actually I could give you a metric. When it takes away from your relationship with God, when it impedes upon your walk with God, then that would be too many. Anything that you put before your relationship with God would be something that needs to be removed out of your life. That would be too many.
If you have, so here's the thing though, when we have placement, when we have job number, because I'm going to compare these women to jobs or cars or anything that's materialism, because that's what we look at as polygyny now, the Andrew Tates and stuff in the world. If I have job number one, we would say that's my primary job, right? Number two job, we can afford to lose. That's an option. That's secondary. Whenever we do this,
hold on. I think that's depending on the context of how much money you're making, the cost of living. That second job may not be as necessary as you just presented it, but it actually may be very necessary depending on your situation, right?
With one wife, that one wife is all you need. Can you justify having a second wife? How that's unnecessary?
Okay, let me ask you this. Let's say a woman gets in a horrible car accident, she becomes paraplegic, right? They've just been married 5 years in it, right? And she cannot do anything with her husband, but her husband is still faithful to her, and she knows that her husband's struggling. He doesn't want to sin and watch porn. And let's say it's legal to do this thing called polygyny, and then so she brings in another woman. Wouldn't that be considered in that context? It would not be considered, that would be probably acceptable under that circumstance. Could you not conceivably see that how that might be?
I'll even give you another example. I don't see it. And here's why. I'm not stranded on a desert island, and the only thing I have is coconuts to eat. All I have is coconuts to eat, and there's two other people in the island. Does it make sense for me to get my protein to resort to cannibalism to do this because I don't have nothing but coconuts? I'm starving. I have no other resource of food to eat, but I can divert to eating human beings and do this.
Well, what human beings? Are they related to you? Because you may not want to eat
No, they're not related to me. They're just regular people on the island.
You know, if you got to eat something, you got to eat something to get that protein.
Survive on coconuts. We can live with this nourishment alone. You're not going to die, but you're going to suffer.
Hold on. But if a man is burning with lust, right? The Bible instructs him it's better for him to get married.
With hunger on this island, all I'm eating is coconuts.
So this man gets married, right? Because he has this desire for sex. He doesn't have that blessing of celibacy like a priest, right? And so then some horrible event happens, and his wife now is unable to fulfill this need that he has, because that's what the scriptures instruct us to do, right? And instead of just divorcing her, because he can say, well, she's practicing sexual immorality, but that she's not doing it because she doesn't want to, but she cannot physically fulfill that need for him. Do you not think that it would not be conceivable under that circumstances, just like if the wife brought in the woman, just like Sarah brought in Hagar, under the same context, the wife brought the woman in, as the church fathers have historically accounted for, as that was the process of doing so. It wasn't like the man was going out there and just shopping for new women, like, oh, I like this one, going to the store, grab this one.
No, I don't think he was doing that.
I think I don't know if it would be. I don't know if it would be considered a sin under that situation.
Do you think suffering is a blessing by your Christian understanding?
What is a blessing?
Do you think suffering is a blessing?
Yes, but also God does not want you to sin. He said, flee from temptation. So if you have this desire and you know that you are not going to be able to be faithful to,
so you're going to cave to your desires, Glenn. That what you're going to say? We're just going to cave to these. I'm going to look for another woman because it's not working.
I'm not even going to sugarcoat things with you. The honest virtual signaling answer would be no. I'm going to be strong. But you know what? We know the real reality is men are weak and men fall short. And men fail all the damn time. So I'm going to give you the real answer and be like, you know what? In this situation, I don't necessarily see that it would be considered sinning if, according to biblical standards, we see this being practiced this way. And there's no explicit, hold on. As I said, there was no explicit condemnation of this. And if the laws permitted it at the time, I could see in that situation that wouldn't be permissible and not considered a sin.
So Glenn, she gets in this horrific accident. Her legs don't work. She can't have sex. Mm-hmm. Does she still go to dentist appointments?
Depending if you wheel her there, probably. You probably wheel her there to the wheelchair. And
so the mouth still works,
oh, actually, I'm glad that you mentioned that. I'm so glad that you mentioned that. So, and I set you up on this.
Her hands broke?
Actually, her hands don't work, and I'll tell you why.
Okay, her hands don't work.
My mentor's wife, several years ago, was involved in a horrible accident and they left her paraplegic.
Gotcha.
Even like if you brush her arm, if you just put your hand on her arm, the sensation would either be like a burning sensation or a very cold sensation. It would hurt her. Like even getting dressed, putting on a dress over her every morning actually would be painful for her. So physically, yes, she could open her mouth, she could talk, but even just putting food in her mouth, it would be a problem. Either it would be too hard to chew, or if the food's too hot or too cold, it would really give her discomfort because her nerves are completely fucked because of the spinal injury. So I said that a paraplegic for a reason, because I seen this situation, I seen this struggle as they were, until the end of his life, because he just recently died in May. And I saw how they were trying to navigate this thing. And I'm not going to talk about their business, but I'm just saying that I could see under that circumstance, under what she was going through, she could not fulfill her marital duties that she actually owes her husband. You understand?
So, Glenn, I'm going to ask you a real question. I'm not trying to be funny here. So let's say the same thing happened for you and only your mouth works. Would you say that it's okay for you to grab a cuck chair, which would now be your wheelchair, and you to watch her go to work in the bedroom?
I'm glad that you brought that up, because you know what? Actually, the Bible is very clear on
it. A cuck, Glenn.
Hold on, because I actually like how you brought this up, because the Bible says if a woman actually sleeps with another man other than her husband, she's not to return to him. So to say that we're equals, because that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to equate. No,
I'm not saying we're equals, but I'm just trying to understand your position.
I'm saying the Bible does so that there's different expectations and things for men and women. So that would be one of them, is that a woman cannot go and do that because your dick doesn't work, but your mouth does. The Bible is very clear. If a woman sleeps with another man, she's not to return to her husband.
So Glenn, her mouth works. She doesn't have these sensations. She's able to eat food. Would you stick with her sexually?
Does she have a gag reflex?
No gag reflex. Her mouth really works well.
I might go with that.
So here's the thing, though. Would you have a more virtuous? And let's be real here. We're not virtuous signaling or anything like that. I'm just going to be honest with you. If I had a wife and she was in a wheelchair and her legs didn't work and she couldn't have sex, I'd say, well, her mouth still works. She has dental appointments and everything like that. I'd be like, you know what? This is all I have. Yeah, so I would think that suffering would be a gift I agree. But it would be God telling me I need to work on my discipline. By the way, I'm not virtue signaling. I would stay the course, to be honest, because there's a reason why this has happened. That's what my logic would lead to that.
And I could agree I could see that, and I could respect that, and I could say, yes, I would probably desire to do the same thing. But then what happens when her mouth doesn't work? When she gets locked on, she can't even open her mouth now. Now you're at a crossroad that you're like, oh, crap, I was cool with this thing now, and I'm not even getting this.
Hold on, Glenn. Now you're walking into bad territory, because
I'm not walking into bad territory, because
women get pregnant for 6 months and can't have sex for 4 months afterwards because they're still healing. We go through this all the time. If she gets lockjaw, she has to recover from lockjaw, just like women have to recover from pregnancy. We wait all the time, bro.
What if it's wired shut permanently? She just threw a straw.
Now you're moving to go.
I'm just.
Well, by the time you're done with this, she's not going to be born with a mouth, Glenn. You see where you're going?
Maybe you zip it shut now, okay? What I'm pointing out is just as ridiculous as a situation that you could present. I could present just an equally ridiculous situation.
So here's the thing, though. You told me, you brought this up. You're the one that brought up if she got in the wheelchair. I didn't bring that up.
I did, and I said under this circumstance, I could see how if she decided to bring another woman in, just like Sarah brought another woman in to Abraham, and God did not rebuke him, I do not see how God would rebuke another man in that situation under that context. That's my position. Now I could be wrong, and I could admit to that if I get proven wrong.
But go ahead.
But I do see a logical connection there. Right. If this is done under this circumstance and the wife brings the woman in and God didn't rebuke it, why would God rebuke it in another situation where there was a need for this fulfillment? Because the whole reason why they brought Hagar in there was because they wanted him to have an heir. They were concerned about that. Right. They lacked faith, in my opinion. But
different culture, different time. I get that. Yeah, but we're not in the same culture and time right now. It would be like you would say, even now, you tell people to stay the course, bro.
But here's the principle that they both have similar. The matters of the heart is not lustful. It is not for a place of idolization or lustful in the sense of wanting to acquire a bunch of more women. It is literally the woman is doing this to fulfill her husband's, needs. And I think that the heart matters. I think God judges the heart of us, and I think that's why he said that David was a man after God's own heart. Well, was God a murderer? Was God an adulterer? No. God called David righteous and said, even when David had fallen short, why did he was considered a man after God's own heart? Because he desired to please God. Even when he fallen short, he desired to make right with him. It really grieved him when he wronged God, right? So that's why I think that the heart, the actions, what really is going on, why you're doing this, I think that matters a lot, that we don't actually factor in these things.
Do you think that we can sin in our heart before we sin in real life and do certain things?
You think you could sin in your mind before you
so
actually...
David didn't pay for Goliath. He didn't pray for him. He killed his ass. That's what the fuck happened.
I know.
Let's be real.
True. And that's where was his sin. And when he repented, he still said David was a man after his own heart. Right. And why did he say that? Because David grieved and he really felt convicted, and he didn't like the idea that he displeased God. Right. He wanted to please God. So there's the desire there. So he still married Bathsheba. Okay. All right. And Bathsheba ended up being the wifey that was there when he died too. Remember that all the other wives were gone. Bathsheba ended up being his ride or die, which is a really weird, story if you think about it.
But you understand the lesson at the end of this? Like he ended up in monogamy. Like it's like all else fails. It's like we have a constant go-to that was referenced in the Bible.
Why did here's the thing. He ended up in monogamy because he can no longer provide for the wives. He can no longer fulfill the duty and the responsibility that he had for them. And he gave his wives away, I believe, right? I think that's what
doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense because there's nothing we can point to as far as like a rational reason for why we should have polygamous. And I'm moving away from the sin argument. I'm moving more towards because I don't think we quite reconcile this. I don't
think it's needed today. I don't think there's any situation that we could point to today other than saying, well, if we were in a dire crisis of the birth rate and we're saying, okay, by any means necessary, let's get the birth rate up. That would be the only conceivable thing I could see why we would actually need to practice it. But at the same time, I would say that you would still need to incentivize men to actually want to take on this extra responsibility, or even the responsibility of one woman to begin with, right? I think we're probably going to get to that point at some point in time, and if we keep on going down the path that we're at, that we're going to be like, hey guys, we're going to give you a tax write-off if you knock up a woman and you take care of her, because we need to have kids, and you'll get $100,000 write-off if you have 6 kids or something. I can see they're going to have to incentivize men to do it, because men don't want to take that risk these days because they don't see it of value or worth it anymore.
Well, it's bad because in American society, we wait till things go to shit before we start steering the ship. Matter of fact, so if you look at, I'm obviously into fitness, right? As an IFBB pro bodybuilder and shit. We discussed this before. So the women's BMI, if you look in the CDC, it's 40% over average. Men are like 27% to be accurate. And now it's like we have what Triple H is now headlining this campaign to create a fitness, some fitness propaganda for society in America. I'm excited about this, but we waited for people to have these carts in Walmart that take up these whole aisles to do this shit. This is fucking bananas to me.
We always do that. We don't ever actually, if you notice something that we do this in society, we don't actually care about anything until it hits our front door. We could be so proactive and address things as we see them coming, but we wait until it's actually DEFCON Delta and it's a crisis and we have to do something last minute. And that's horrible as a culture and a society we do.
Until it fucking takes money away from corporations and pisses somebody off, the few percent of that are higher. It's like, if you have somebody that's going to be this is why I think that there's never going to be a civil war in America. The reason why I don't think that there's going to be a civil war is because as long as people are fed and entertained during COVID, entertainment, people were fed as long as they can go out during certain times. That was the test that all of us failed during that time period. And it's like, it shows that we will not have a civil war because our nation's too fat, we're too complacent, too lazy, too entertained. This is crazy. That's why I don't think it'll happen.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think we are way too comfortable. We have too much at risk to lose. And we're like, well, I don't want to lose us. We'll just concede to this. I mean, we have done that with the conservatives. Have done that with everything when it comes to gay marriage. They bent over backwards and took it up the ass for that, you know. And so this is my opinion. And here's a secular argument for this. Why here's the argument why polygamy should be allowed. Because it's no longer in the United States, we're not upholding what God has called marriage. No. The country has said, you know, you can marry your cheeseburger, 2 dudes could get married, whatever. It's no longer the original standard. So for the sake of the population increasing, right? Because gay marriage is a dead end. They don't genetically, they're not reproducing. So you would think that if we're trying to solve this problem of the birth rate, the logical solution would be, well, let's let those other people that want to have more than one wife, who could produce more than one children, you know, marriage, you know, so that they could have more kids and we could, you know, it just kind of seems like the logical solution in that sense.
It wouldn't make sense. And here's why it doesn't make sense is because we already have people practicing polygyny. Tyrone has like 3 baby mamas already. And then not to mention that, I don't know if you know this, but there's a limited child support. When it gets to 10 kids,
yeah,
they
10
don't have
kids
child support after that. This is crazy.
Hey, Nick Cannon was smart.
Yo, they already telling you like we got a limit for this, and it's like this. Yep. So I'm telling like if it's 10, that's so we do have a metric of what's too much for modern day society.
Yeah, it would say it would be 10. But what about 19 and counting?
If we have a limit, that's what I could point to as far as like not biblically, but secular wise. What's too much is like 10. So I mean, if you want to use that, that's your metric.
Sure, we could go. I could agree with that. That would be the cap, right?
That would be a secular cap that I would use.
I'll clearly state that would be a secular cap if we were
because you can't take care of the 11th kid because the 11th kid isn't supported at all. Yeah, there's no check for that kid.
Just realistically, you don't have enough time in the day to give each child the adequate quality time that they would need with their parent, you know, or you wouldn't be able to adequately give your wife the time that she needs because you also got to nurture that relationship. If you're trying to manage all 10 kids and work enough to provide for all 10 kids, you know, you have to live on a farm and all of them have to be working on the farm. And that's what they did back in the day. You know,
right? But they did that with one woman. I mean, in most cases,
and
in most cases, they did it with one woman.
It also was not uncommon to see, you know, more than one wife in certain areas.
But it wasn't like the most common thing to see.
I didn't say it was the most common. I said, but it wasn't uncommon.
Farming during that time. Most people were hunters during the time. Most people were just average laymen that were just trying to get by. We grew our own food there inside. You need to have to propagate this town and village. So
let's be realistic. Back then and even now, the only people that would be able to actually exercise this would be the people that actually had the means to fulfill that, right? You know, because like with the Latter-day Saints, right? They have a structure and a standard for a guy if he wanted to get another wife. The church actually had to approve of it. First, he had to meet the financial requirements to be able to even be considered. And then there was other things that they had to be fulfilled. Now, I'm not just saying that's a good way to do it, but I'm saying that even realistically, let's say even if it was legalized, realistically, we know most men are not going to get that. 20% of the men are what women are going for.
I mean, aside from the Mormons' false prophet dilemma that they can't get past, it's like, it has to make sense for the average layman. So if we're talking about the average layman, it's like very few men can afford 2 children, let alone. So it's like it takes a village to support. That's why I think that the church is a good place to go to, because now you have public shame. You have shame from the church. It's more of a communal setting. They also support you guys staying together. I mean, it's really good, but it's like broken down in the West, and we basically fuck all. It's like stupid.
Well, we have conceded the church, and I mean this, and I don't mean like all churches, and I'm not saying all denominations or, you know, all backgrounds of churches, but I'm saying overall Christianity has conceded to feminism. The only place I see feminism truly thriving is in the church, because secularly out there in the world, transgender is doing pretty good job at, you know, making feminism look dumb, because we got dudes winning awards that were set aside for women. When you have International Women's Day and you got dudes getting awards for women, makes you wonder, one, are women that bad that guys are getting awards? Or two,
no, it just means that we're better. And I'll tell any woman
it's the most misogynist thing. I say trannies are the most misogynist guys out there, that they are taking the acknowledgement that actually are set aside for real women. That's really fucking misogynist if you think about it. Yeah,
well, I think it needs to happen, to be honest. And this is my argument for that. This is my argument for women doing the Olympics and all that other shit. So it's like if there's a woman, if there's a man that's in a boxing event, chances are women voted for that guy to be in there. Guys aren't voting for their kids to be transitioned at an early age. That's women pushing for all this. So if you let women vote, you let them run into this conclusion that's going to end up in bad outcomes. And once a woman gets knocked the hell out, they're going to all of a sudden be like, no, we don't need this. But until then, we don't have a reference to point out why women shouldn't do things. But if we let it run its logical course, we can now have an example to point to. She got knocked the fuck out. So it's like, see,
and I agree with you.
Let you do this.
Actually, the way I actually refer to that is that we actually don't respect women enough to let them feel the consequences of their decisions that they made.
That's what I just said. Yes, we need to let them play out.
Yeah, actually, it's the most unloving thing that we could do is to remove them from the consequences that they're facing, because how could they learn?
That promotes feminism, believe it or not. Inadvertently promotes their own decision. It keeps chaos afloat and adds fuel to the fire when we don't fight this.
And you know, in Ephesians, right? In Ephesians 5, it says like the husband loves the wife like Christ loved the church, right? And he washes her with the word. What do you do when you wash something? You're changing something from a dirty state to a clean state, and you are correcting it from its current state, dirty, and you're correcting it to its final state, which is clean. So that means loving your wife is actually correction as well, not just being there, and hugging her, but how are you correcting her? With the word, right? Using the word, washing of the word. So I don't think people catch that enough. And you just kind of like, let's just say extrapolate that between men and women, right? As men, God has put us in a position in the hierarchy, right? A design that we should be washing of those women in our lives, whether it's our sisters, our nieces or whatever, people we care about, of the word in a way that is correcting, not condemning, or maybe not necessarily, I don't like to say condemning, but we need to have this correction. And how did Jesus correct is something really important, I think guys kind of like avoid that, because when they think, I got to love my wife like Christ loved the church, well, I'm just going to steer her and be a happy wife, happy life thing. And that's not loving your wife. That's actually the exact opposite.
No, you're actually inverting the relationship. You're making her the leader, not you. Because here's the thing, though. I can be in a relationship, but as long as my wife listens to me and obeys, as long as I'm not morally bankrupt when I do certain things. But the moment she says, you're great, I like it when you lead, but not like that. Now she's going to be the leader if I submit to her in that regard. Because it's like they want us to lead, but how they want us to lead. And that makes them the leader.
And if you notice, it's like everything that they consider toxic, like whenever they're doing the whole toxic masculinity thing.
Toxic just means I don't like it.
It means I don't like it in any context that doesn't benefit me. Because you know what? They say men are competitive, right? Oh, you have a problem with competition? Well, not when they're the NBA player and they got a $32 billion contract and you're able to, get him, right?
No,
you don't have the problem with the competition now, right? Or, they say guys being very risky, being very daredevilish, right, is toxic because they're putting themselves in a life-ending situation. Well, if you are getting graped by 3 guys in the alleyway, and I see this, you probably want me to intervene and risk my life to save you, right? That seems pretty toxic to me, though, right? Under your standard, but it's not considered toxic when it benefits the woman. Toxic masculinity is whenever something that doesn't benefit the woman is utilized. Masculine traits being utilized.
Masculinity doesn't exist. It's just
I agree, but I'm just saying that's the way that they frame it. Is the trait is actually not toxic. It's only when it doesn't benefit them they want to label it toxic. Now, I agree with you.
I don't think that exists. All they're talking about is conditional shit that shifts from one goalpost to the next with women, and it can be toxic on Monday. The same very thing could be not toxic the next Monday. But you know why? Because whenever we have relationships with women, we have to be this rock that their emotion waves crash into. Jay Waller, I've heard him say this, but here's why. It's because women have threes that happen, right? Are they the same emotion when they have their period as when they don't have their period? Most likely, probably not. What about when they're pregnant? Oh shit, another change. What about when they're menopausal? Oh shit, that's a lot of fucking changes that we have to deal with, that we can't move from these positions. We have to be unchanging in our standard as men. And this is what I also tell men. If you say some shit, stick by it and stand by it and be continuously in alignment with what you say. Just be consistent, bro. Women are not consistent. You can't buy consistency from women to save your life, but we have to be that and set their standards. That's why when you make them the leader, all you're going to have is fucking chaos in your life.
And you still get the blame. As soon as you put her as a leader, you still get the blame at the end of the day because she's going to blame you for when it fails. Well, you should have.
I'll take that any day because at least I have the responsibility that mirrors the authority. Absent any of this, all you have is chaos, but you still take the blame. So I want to take that. That's even worse. Yeah, that's insane.
What we have done now is we have made men red on cops. We have made them red on cops. They have all the responsibility, but they have no authority. And that's the problem. I wanted to read this too, because we were talking about this earlier before.
You created you created a pseudo slave class when this happens. And I don't know if you know a woman named Enemy Charlie. I debated her ass and I drugged the shit out of her on this debate that we had. Because I was asking her, how do you...
It was on Sarah's stream. Wasn't it on Sarah's stream? Yeah, I think I watched that.
Yeah, I dragged her in a debate before me and Andrew Wilson did a debate with her. And I asked her, I was like, how, in a sense, do you not create a pseudo slave class doing this? And of course, not John Wick, but Wick TV is extremely liberal. And I asked them this, how do you not turn men into a pseudo slave class when you have all the men with this responsibility and zero authority? They could never reconcile this. Mm-hmm. And I'm just like, this is the continuing thing that happens again and again in society.
Well, you know what I love to argue with when I hear that men need to be servant leaders? For one, the servant leader model. The servant leader model was not even a biblical model. It was actually by Robert Greenleaf. I just threw it in
my stomach, and that's impossible, Glenn.
So here's the question I ask them all the time. Okay, so they're supposed to be servant leaders like Jesus, right? Like, yeah, okay. Did Jesus ask the people that he was serving how he was going to serve them? No. Oh, who dictated that? Jesus did. Oh, okay. So Jesus determined how he was going to serve the people, right? Did Jesus, who determined whether or not Jesus was being a good servant leader? Well, Jesus was, because he was in that position. So the way that they have bastardized this whole servant leader idea is that, well, they have it as, well, who would determine if the husband's being a good servant leader? Well, the wife would. Well, that is not according to even their version of servant leader model.
Here's my reputation. I would say it like this. Glenn, do you think that Jesus is God?
I think he's part of the Trinity. Yes. Father, Son.
I think that Jesus is God because Matthew said, my Lord, my God, he's God. So here's the thing though. When I say that Jesus is God, I would flip this around on its ear and ask them, do you think God is a servant leader? Sounds really stupid.
Well, here's the thing. Why don't they just change it to like servant king? Like, or servant emperor, right? Like they don't like the idea, the connotation of king, leader, but they don't like that.
They don't like that elevation because then they have to plead to something that's a greater source of an arbiter of rules and all this.
Because it's actually it doesn't make sense. It's oxymoron. You're a servant leader. But you're a servant king.
They create oxymorons all the time. What's emotional intelligence? They couldn't tell me a distinct definition of what that is.
You know what cracks me up when they say women are more emotionally intelligent than men? I'm like, no.
Stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life. I fucking hate that.
Because you express all your emotions freely, willingly, with no control, does it make you emotionally intelligent? What would make you emotionally intelligent is realizing, you know what? I'm getting upset. I probably should walk away from this before I make a fool out of myself or react emotionally. That would be emotionally intelligent to actually know when you are getting to your line. If I was going to agree that there's
I'm suffering from oxygenated hypoxia. What the fuck? Like flaming water exists. Like what the fuck?
It's retarded.
It's stupid. Like skinny. I'm skinny fat. Women say this all the time. I'm just skinny fat. What?
That is true. We both know that's true. Those are those cardio queens, the women that go to the gym and they do no weightlifting. They're on the treadmill walking the whole damn time. That's skinny fat. Or
they'll say, "Oh, babe, I'm too fat," and they're not fat at all.
Yeah.
This is what I mean. Like, I don't see guys go around saying, I think I'm gaining too much weight, bro, and they're skinny as shit. Like, come on, bro. Women do this all the time, but guys don't do this.
Well, actually, you know what? The sad thing is, I have been seeing over time men actually adopting more female behaviors and traits and how they interact.
Who raised them, though, Glenn? Who raised them?
Well, it could be the mom, and that's fine. I can concede that. But you know what? Men have actually accepted it. That's a bigger problem.
Yeah, but who raised those men that accept this?
Well, my dad had my grandpa, but you know what I'm saying? Like, that can only go back so many generations because there were 2 generations ago where there were not as much divorce. We had fathers in the home, right? It's been more like the past 50 years, I would like to say, give or take, where we have seen the decline in absence of fathers in the home.
If I talked about testosterone being the level of 70-year-olds, even at 30, men 30 have the testosterone level of men that were 70. It's like if you go back to the men that were 70, what was their testosterone level like? And then what also mirrored this? What was the marriage rate then? What was the faithfulness commitment ratio that we had in marriages?
What also was encouraging the
testosterone? We're
testosterone
losing over time. It just so happens to be tangential that we're losing testosterone, and then all these other structures, men are becoming more feminized, and we're losing all this shit. It's crazy.
I actually asked Pastor Joel Webman one day about a year ago. I was reading this passage in I think it's Leviticus. It says when a woman, if 2 men are in a fight, right, and the woman tries to protect her husband or engage in the fight to defend her husband, and sees
the guy's jewels, his junk,
cut that bitch's hand off, right? Yeah, because she made him effeminate. And I was just like thinking about this idea of women societally have made men effeminate, and the consequences of a man being effeminate is what we end up seeing in Isaiah, right? 3, where we see that the women are your rulers, your children are leaders, right? Everything is upside down, inverted from the way God's designed. The women are walking around all haughty with their necks stretched out with all the jewelry and everything. We have a bunch of 304s going around, right? And it tells us what happens at this time when this is going on. The men of good men of status, our soldiers, our warriors, they end up dying by the sword. There's famine. These girls that were 304s with nice hair end up being bald headed, looking like Jada Pinkett Smith. And there's this consequence that happens because of the inversion of God's authority and God's structure, but also because of the disobedience of the people. And it says at that time in 4 verses 1, it says at that time there will be 7 women coming to one man, begging him, we will feed ourselves, clothe ourselves. Let us just call us by your name and cover us from our shame. Meaning because they should have been married women, but they chose like the whole life. And now they're in need to be this male protection. And now they're willing to, concede like, hey, we'll take care of our own costs. Just let us be your wife. And I find that interesting because if you see our society now, I think that's where we're heading to a degree. Maybe not exactly in that sense, but I think Isaiah,
no, we see that now.
We do, but I mean, not to the full extent.
I'll give you an example of this. Like, let's say, because we've seen the examples on this on CCTV footage and shit like that. There's a man walking down the sidewalk with his girl. His girl mouths off and talks shit to another guy. The guy, all of a sudden, because of her, he's now in a fight. She gets in the way. And in order for him to move her out of the way, he gets knocked the fuck out.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like because of women, we're now becoming effeminate by position and our duties being stripped of us by position because of her putting us in this position. So it's like when you talk about people in reference in the Bible of like her turning to grab the guy's jewels, fruits, we all know what they're talking about when they talk about the women grabbing the other person and her hand should be cut off. So it's like that's a good example of this in modern day environment where you're allowing a woman to intercede on your behalf, thus making you effeminate because she's providing this authoritarian position of I got this, but she can't finish it. You started the fight, but you can't finish it. And that's the problem that we run into when we put women in leadership roles by virtue and also function and duty. It creates this bastardization, which jeopardizes us, makes us vulnerable and susceptible to the enemy. And that's problematic.
Let me add this to it. But we have also raised men, or these boys, I should say, these males, to expect or be okay with 50-50. Oh, she can make money too. What we have done is we have allowed men and we have put women in positions to have to fulfill the portion of his requirement. That's his duty. He is supposed to provide, protect, lead, and be the priest of the home. But when we are saying, hey, you know what? I can't necessarily do all my duties, so I need you to assist me with my duties. Dude, do you not realize what you're telling her? I'm not man enough to fulfill my duties to you. I need you to clean up after me to do it.
Well, for
That's
anybody
bad.
watching, you just killed your bedroom. You just killed the desire that you have for her. You also killed your respect because you're creating more room for resentment in the long run.
Yep.
And this leads to relationships because I'll tell you, any couple, and I've sat on plenty of panels on podcasts with tons of 304s and all this. And I've asked them, have you ever been in a relationship where you live together and you walk past each other in the hall and didn't say anything to each other? That's when you started breaking up. And a lot of people, when they realize this, you can see the inverse of this. Matter of fact, if you find an arguing couple over a dinner table or at a picnic or somewhere, and they're arguing and bickering, ask them this one question and see how fast your mind changes, because you know that women are extremely conditional in this regard. Ask her, do you remember the first time you met him? Watch this fucking light turn on. Yeah, he wore this blue suit and he didn't want to talk to me and this and that. Her feelings automatically change, but it's because we've disconnected and we've lost this role in society. We don't know how to maintain this role because she doesn't remember day one. If I have to make you remember how was it like when you first met, she doesn't know what this is like because you don't have this role anymore.
And I think that there's a lack, and here's what I say all the time too. I said, you know what, even if we repealed the 19th and we got all women out of the workforce right now, if I snap my fingers and that happened, the reality is that the men today are not equipped to actually fulfill the role as the patriarch of their home as that they would be expected. Although men would be expected the woman to be the stay-at-home wife at this point. And that right there is, we're not thinking about how, if we actually snapped our fingers and made all women Stepford wives, are the men today equipped with actually being able to fulfill what would be expected of them when they have been living in this 50-50 egalitarian culture and society? They would not. Most men will collapse and crush. I want to read this to you because this is actually written by my friend, Pastor Mike Foster. And it's part from his book called It's Good to Be a Man. And I mentioned earlier, there always will be a patriarchy. It depends on whether it's a good patriarchy or an evil patriarchy. And I get that from his writings here, right? And he's actually giving us the breakdown of how an evil patriarchy deals with men, right? So, and he actually references Pharaoh from the Bible as how an evil patriarch, right? So what we see is that first, an evil patriarchy will try to harness masculine energy. After all, why turn it towards your end to fulfill your desire, your goals, right? This is the first impulse of any patriarch, since he is the leader of men, regardless of how wicked or righteous he is. Most nations have done this to some degree through enculturation and education, especially patriotism, right? Men go to the war because being patriotic, military service, formal schools. We see Nebuchadnezzar doing this with the Israelite noblemen in Daniel 1. Our own recent history is a repellent of the example, from legitimate patriotism that honored the fifth commandment to vile programs that pervert it, like Hitler's youth or the Islamic radicalization of the disaffected men in America. Pharaoh too tried to harness the sons of Israel, and we can detect that strong cultural influence of the Egyptians in idolatry of the Exodus generation. So bad patriarch will try to harness masculine energy. We need it. They need it to further their mission. Well, if they can't harness it, what will they do? Pacify it. Pacify men. We see that now. If the energy of men cannot be harnessed, evil patriarch will sap it out by channeling them into pursuits that leave them impotent and to rebel. They're chasing porn, drugs, video games, every materialism, things that actually don't really matter, right? They don't get them anywhere. They're just spinning their wheels, and they're keeping them so distracted and tired that they have no way to resist. They're not focused on what is actually going on and being able to actually be a resistance of the evil force, right? Lastly, if they cannot pacify men, they destroy them. We see that now with making our little boys hate even being boys. They don't even like to be their own sex. They want to cut off their dingus. We have made men feel that it's a lesser thing to be a man. It's not a good thing, that masculinity is toxic. We destroy them. We make them hate themselves, or we actually push them to delete themselves, and that's what an evil patriarch is. And we are currently having this model. And if we really actually want to see any change going on, we have to actually combat this. We have to avoid this. We need to have a good patriarchy. Well, what is a good patriarchy? Well, I would say we see God's character in the Bible. That would be a good patriarch to model after, you know? So I thought this was very profound in his writing because he points out the problem currently using scripture reference of Pharaoh. Now, his good example is Nehemiah. And I've been saying that we need actually a generation of Nehemiah's built. And I think that's probably what your mission is too, to a degree, even though you're probably not saying that explicitly. But I think you want to inspire young men to be better men than previous generations, more godly men, men of courage and masculinity and good patriarchs overall, right? So
yes, that's what I want. I want a propagandized culture, because this is what's going to happen. We're going to suffer through propaganda, whether we like it or not. There's always going to be forms of indoctrination, whether we like it or not. What is it like when you're underneath a man's tutelage in a two-parent home? We could say that's indoctrination. We could say that's propagandization through the home. But I think that's better than sending your kids off to the school to where students can be indoctrinated by public schooling systems underneath the rainbow flag and all this other else. Because you don't know what Sally Smith is teaching your kid. We don't know what kind of agendas or belief systems that they've allowed in this public. That's why it's public school. The public has their hands on your kid. But I think that if you create, and here's the thing with the debate that I had. The problem with this is like, we have now systems where guys like Tom Fuller was saying, well, we need to just rein this in. But how do you rein this in if you tell people to not do certain things? If we don't start this, because they're saying, well, we don't have good men that are in marriages. Well, we need to incentivize people to get married. We need to promote this. We need to promote and indoctrinate the youth. We could even say that too, because that's the thing though, is like if we're promoting a dad in the home and a mom that's constant in the home, there needs to be a program for this, because here's the thing. I brought up Triple H coming out with this fitness industry propagandization, this culture that they're having. Now it's like, now that we have this, it's like we can do this with marriage. We can do this with everything else. Why do we have to wait for the ship to be halfway sunken in the ocean for us to say, oh shit, time to get the buckets out? We're witnessing everything crash before our eyes, and we're not doing anything. And this is what I'm saying. This is my whole point, Glenn. The whole reason why we're here today talking about whether or not something's just in the underlying the thing that I want to say, we could even say this is the covert message that I want to bring along, is that if we have men fighting in the trenches doing this, whether or not you call it the manosphere, whatever, I represent Christ. So I don't know what I represent as absent Christ, because that's all I have underneath my belt as far as like what I want to promote. And this is masculinity. This is a patriarchal structure that we have. And if we don't promote this, everything's all lost. But the problem with this is we have men typing, texting certain things and saying, go read my Substack and do this. What's the comprehension level of America? It's below 8th grade level. It's like these people that are reading your Substack aren't the people that we're trying to reach. The people that we're trying to reach right now are the people that are going to watch these clips, see things, even if it's clipped out of content, put the full video to where they can get the explanation. Men like you and me and everybody, Rollo Tomasi, Andrew Wilson, people like that are by intent and nature trying to fight this good fight, and we're in the trenches. My call right now is for all men to be in the trenches and fight with us. I don't want to be the lone man fighting. You know, you don't want to be the only one fighting by yourself. I want brothers to come out of behind their keyboard from texting other people. Get in here and literally fight on video. If you have ideas, don't complain about this. If you have a problem, this is how you drive a woman away. Bring her a problem and not a solution. Because I'm telling you,
that is the biggest
problem for you. You're bastardizing your relationship, and you're creating more of the singularity that you promote in society by not doing anything.
See, I'm glad you mentioned that, because that has been my biggest problem with the current state of, whether you want to call it the manosphere or the red pill, is that they do really good at the descriptions of the problem. They're good at pointing out the problem. They say, feminism is the problem, female promiscuity is the problem. And I'm like, yes, I agree. But when they provide solutions, right, the prescriptions of it, none of them are to combat feminism or to suppress female promiscuity. Actually, everything that you've noticed that you can see that they do prescribe actually teaches men how to capitalize on feminism and to how to capitalize on female promiscuity for their hedonistic, selfish, gain. So what I have a problem with the current state of the manosphere or whatever is that nobody's actually addressing the actual problem that they say that they acknowledge as the problem. They're actually finding workarounds how to capitalize individually on the problem. And to me, that's problematic in itself. That's not moving the needle one way or the other. Actually, if anything, you're actually saying that you need feminism in order to stay relevant. And I think both sides of this do. I think to a degree that feminism needs, an adversary like the red pill to stay relevant. And I think the red pill actually needs feminism and promiscuity to stay relevant. Because if, let's say we combated female promiscuity and feminism back just like even 50%, all these content creators and all these, gurus would be out of a job. So the incentive to actually providing real solutions is not really motivated by them. Because if they do give everybody solutions, well, then they'll be out of a job to a degree, right? And I have a problem with that. When I was a personal trainer, because I was a trainer for the Navy, I would always give my clients 3 months when they were on FEP, those little fat bastards. And I would only train them for 3 months because I said, look, after 3 months, I have given you all the tools that you need for you to actually take this on and be successful yourself. What we're trying to do right now is, just keep on coming back to my show. I'll give you a little bit more information there. And we just kind of there's just a little breadcrumbing, but no real actionable solutions. And that's what I'm trying to do is say, hey, from a biblical worldview, here is the actual solutions that we could see that we as men could imply in our own lives. I don't ever talk about women. I'm like, I don't care what women are doing. Women are doing this. I hear all the time, well, women are 304s. That's fine. What are you doing? The only thing that you could actually control and actually change is you. That is the primary thing that that you have power over. If you are not focused on leveling up and becoming the better version of yourself for you, then you are wasting time talking about women. All these guys in the red pill rage and they're yelling and foaming at the mouth at you calling every woman a 304. To me, that's counterproductive. That means you have too much time on your hands and you're not addressing the areas in your life that you could actually, do better at. And as you level up, as you know, your options do get better. As the more success you have, the more opportunity you have for better options or better situations in other areas in life, not just relationships. So if you're not focused on that, then you are just whining. You're wasting time. You're not doing anything.
One thing I would say, Glenn, and this is what I take. I was listening to you. This is the thing that would, in order to summarize this real quick, I think my best message isn't to bro harder. That's not my message. My message would be to not chase pussy and to put it up on some mantle. If you're broing harder to chase vagina and then broing harder and doing things because of vagina, that's bad because the intention matters. Because if I'm going to be a better man, not for a woman,
that's why I said for you.
That we need to preach now.
That's exactly why I said be a better man for you. That's what I said. You need to be a better man for you.
That's
for
what
your
I'm saying.
Outcome.
A lot of men are getting to this red pill manosphere arena, and the red pill has fractioned off into so many different subsets. One person calls it a descriptor. One person says, no, there's prescriptions in here. And one person says, I hate women. It's like we have the same thing as like this fractioned off delivery system of social media. People hear one message and just like telephone, they hear something that somebody else did, even though it was the same conversation. It is crazy. So my whole thing in summation that I would say is like the reason why I did bodybuilding and the reason why I wanted to be better was because if I did it for a woman, it wouldn't last long because after I got the woman, guess what I'm going to lose? I don't need this anymore. I got the woman. So it doesn't make sense to do all this for a woman because you're chasing something that is optional that can see it as a conditional thing because she might find something better. To me, it's the most foolish thing. So when people look at Andrew Wilson, they're saying, well, look at all these women around him. That's why I should get a Lambo. This way. And I'm just like, do you understand how this message can be bastardized?
Oh, absolutely. That's why I always say you're not a woman is the sex or the outcome of success. She's a byproduct of your success. One, I think, if you look at the creation, I love this example. God gave Adam a mission before he gave him a wife. God gave him a purpose before a wife. You notice that, right?
Yeah.
He had them. So a man's purpose is not his wife. The wife is supposed to be your helpmate and assist you while you're on, fulfilling your purpose, right? That would be the formation of this. Well, here's Adam. He has this purpose and his mission God gave him, and God gave him now this woman to be his helpmate what? To assist him on his mission, right? So the woman is not your mission and not your purpose. Men need to stop thinking that way. And also it says in Corinthians, man was not created from woman, but woman was created for man. Therefore, man was not created for women, but women for men. Men need to understand that as well, that you were not created to serve at the pleasure of women. It's the other way around. And in the sense, and realizing men need to reposition this thing. I'm not saying that you don't need to appeal to women to try to get her to like you. I'm not saying that. But what you should be focused on is creating the best version of you and the lifestyle that you want for you, and presenting a framework in a relationship that's so attractive that makes her want to abandon hers and live in yours.
Because it's superior. Because here's the thing with the Andrew Tate model. If we think about this, we know that he's not just with one, monogamous relationship. They accept him. They're willingly, that's an argument for another day, whether or not the court stuff's true or not. But I haven't seen anything concrete for him being a rapist or whatever you call it. But here's the thing, though. The worst thing with the polyamory argument is for men to, the biggest deception is for men to suffer through their options. If you have a monogamous relationship, the less you're likely to suffer through an option of like secondary first, and then there's more duty and everything like this. That's why I think that it can become cumbersome and burdensome. If a man takes on more than one job, he better damn well accept the responsibility. But I mean, this is to your argument, but also to my argument. I'm just saying that this is something that we need to stray from. I think in order to lean towards virtue, even if the handicap situation happens or anything else like that, that's why I say, does the mouth work? I think we can be pragmatic, even outside of the Bible, and say it makes sense. Regardless, I do. I agree with you, but I also want to be careful. Not again, like my main contention with this thing was to call something a sin that God doesn't call explicitly Himself, and I caution people to do that. I caution people not to do that. I should say, because there is two warnings. Again, there's one in Deuteronomy, one in Revelations 22, I believe, where it says, "Do not add anything to this," because that would be a sin in itself. And or not to take anything away from this as well, because that would be a sin in itself. So I don't want to say that something is a sin that God doesn't say is a sin. I think that's just a safe rule of thumb to live by. That's just me. That's a good metric. That's why I lean on interpretation. Like, let's say, because tomorrow I have to go to liturgy, and I'm going to talk to my spiritual father and say, hey, I just had this conversation with Glenn Lawrence yesterday. I just want to get your take on polyamory, whether or not you think it's a sin or not. And then hear his translation. I guarantee it's going to be superior than anything I come up with.
I would say explicitly use the word polygyny, because words matter. Words have definitions.
Polygyny. Yes.
Yeah, because that was the only context. Because you never see a woman having two husbands and God condoning that in the Bible. You never see that. Actually, we see that God say if your wife goes sleeps with another man, she is not to. You're not to accept her back. You know what I'm saying? So, I think we're at a good point here. I think we both see that I think that you probably don't think I am promoting or condoning this thing, or saying that this is a solution, because I'm not. I think you see my position on this now a little differently than probably before, right?
I'll tell you, this is the conclusion. If I took anything away from this conversation, Glenn, I don't think that you're a bad guy. I don't think you're I don't think you're Andrew Tate number 2, because I've heard that about you. People talk all the time. It's like I'm Andrew Tate, Timu, whatever. It's like people have their own things that they say. I probably have people talking, shit about me online. In fact, I do. I have death threats and everything. Like I get all this stuff.
I had a few of those too. So
yeah, especially from certain communities, I definitely get threats from them. I've been doxxed and all this other stuff. So here's the thing that I take away from this. I don't think that we've quite reconciled whether or not sin or not. I think it's on the fence in regard to this. And I hate this. The reason why is because the church doesn't like you lukewarm. In the public society, they'll tell you we hate fence sitters all the time. So because I'm here, that's why I have to go to my spiritual father and get the final analysis from him tomorrow. Because here's the thing. I'll admit to you, the reason why I didn't want to have this is because I'm not as competent as like your Luigi's, your Jay Dyers and people like that. I'm just I'm a pro bodybuilder that just happened to fall into this debate community and happens to be best friends with Andrew Wilson, people in a part of the Crucible. Like, this is the thing I look into. if I'm going to be as responsible as possible, I'll have a conversation, but I'm not going to be an authority and have a debate and just be like, look, this is the right truth and all this. But I will have a conversation and tell you I don't know absolutely what the translation is. But what I get from you is not an absolute, which I feel like you're an honest person in this regard. I don't think that you're promoting polygyny. I don't think that you're offering this as a prescription. But as far as a sin, I'm more clear on your rhetoric as to say, well, it doesn't absolutely say it's a sin. Well, that's where I also counter you and say, well, it doesn't absolutely say it is.
Yeah,
so that's where we're at. That's where we're at.
And,
right?
I could agree with that. Like I find one thing. This is where I would go back to, and I agree with you. I think that's a good place where we're at, and this is a good thing where we can say, okay, we see where we're coming from, and it's not from a nefarious place, or it's both from a truthful wanting to understand and know the truth, rather than having an agenda or wanting to have a W under your belt to take a W. It's no, we actually want the truth overall in this entire conversation. And that's what I wanted to have with you to begin with, is that no, I really want to understand more. Maybe you could give me more insight that would give me a revelation, like, okay, I now understand this, and I've even talked to different, pastors, and they give me the script and stuff. And I'm like, you're reading a script. I don't like that. Give me something real. So I actually think this was actually a very good sharpening of each other in a way. This is testing iron in a sense. This is spiritual jousting or verbally jousting over something that's challenging us. Why do we hold this position that we do? And it's, sparring.
Well, God gave us logic, right? You would say that God is the God of logic, right? So when we talk about the logos, right, we're talking about logic. So here's the thing, though. Logically, I can lean into my own understanding, and I know that, banging 3 chicks is wrong because the outcomes STD increases. I can be very pragmatic and say, well, I don't want to deal with 3 babies because this could probably happen because we have pre-cum and semen that happen, right? Even if we don't think that we ejaculated, we can still get somebody pregnant. There's all these other problems. Maybe she has a husband I don't know about. So we're actually opening the door for more. So I can be a pragmatic person. The problem with this is I'm not authoritarian on I'm talking about theology and things like this, but I can lean on the outskirts and be adjacent to this and talk around the subject, and I can talk about scripture, and then we could say, well, what if this happens and this is what all this conversation ended up being, to be honest with you, was a what if that we ran into where I need to plead to a higher authority, which actually is a good thing, because all I'm doing is showing you that I can admit that I don't know everything, and also I can point to people in the direction that I could point to church authority, where people that I could talk to that are non-denoms all the time, they'll say, well, we'd interpret our own scripture or do this. They're leaning into their own understanding. Well, I'm like, well, I'm so glad I'm not a part of this. I can go to somebody else who knows more than me. I think it's more humbling, and we're submitting to Christ more when we actually say we don't know. And that's all I'm saying right now is that even if we're at a crossroads and we're sharpening iron, I'm pretty sure this is going to be the last run-in we'll have, aside from panels and things like this. I'm pretty sure that, because here's the thing though, Glenn, I'll be honest with you. I sometimes pick fights on purpose, because if you say something, I'm always on lookout. And I'm not saying I'm an instigator, but I'm a brawler. If you say something crazy, and here, when I was on Rolo, he said, if you see some bullshit, call it out. Because if you don't call it out, it makes you yourself bullshit because you don't call it out. There's one thing that I'm known for, Glenn, is I don't back down from debates. I don't run from debates. Actually, with you, dealing with you and Sarah's channel, the reason why I was having a hard time responding was because I was waiting on church authority and all this other stuff. And I got frustrated. This debate or this conversation is an example of my own frustration. I couldn't wait any longer. You know what? I saw on the channel. Let's do this right now. We'll just have a conversation. But I'm telling you, I'm a man, and I think that we need more men that are competent at confrontation. If you don't like something, say something. But underneath the women's rule in a household, you don't say anything. You're in a cucked out relationship, believe it or not, because you're sitting as the world fucks your woman, as you're in the corner, as you're financially destitute and becoming problematic and falling prey to her chaos. And we have this in modern day examples everywhere.
I say this all the time. The church, the modern church has had the spirit of androgyny, which is transgenderism, way before we see the transgenders walking around in the street. Okay, so I agree with you. Everything that you said, I agree with you, and I think that what men need to realize is confrontation is not a bad thing. Actually, confrontation is a very good thing, and it allows you to get clarity. You're not certain what's going on here. You're confused. There's a problem. There's an issue here. Now I'm going to confront you to clarify what is this issue. So then in doing so, I'm gaining knowledge of what actually is transpiring, and I'm not acting on false information or what I think is, going on. I'm actually coming to you, confronting you with this thing and addressing the problem. And that's a good thing. And men don't like that. Men are so risk adverse or conflict adverse. They want to, men are so more passively aggressively today than anything. They don't ever just address the person they have a beef with.
But here's the thing though, Glenn, and this is, maybe I'm just a dumbass for thinking this, but this is how my mentality came. I grew up in group homes, shelters. I was homeless at 12 on growing up. I got put in the system at juvie, and I ended up being in law enforcement later on. But anyways, my whole point is, if Big Ricky wanted to fight after school, people were like, why are you going to fight Big Ricky? He's twice your size. And you know what I told my friend? I said, well, I don't think you can die from getting knocked out. This is how I literally thought. I was like, I've never died getting knocked out before. And then you know what I told him? Because he tried to stop me. I said, well, isn't his chin the same size as mine, even though he's bigger than me? Like, I literally had my own belief system, because it wasn't the fact that, because I didn't associate that with death. I didn't associate. So men will see this and they'll see a death societally because of shame. I felt like there wasn't shame associated with this, because I didn't have a dad or a mom indoctrinating me with this is what a man does. I had to figure this out. So maybe in my dumb meathead brain as a kid, I was like, well, if I don't fight Big Ricky, I'm going to have to deal with Big Ricky and have my lunch stolen all the time. How do I stop this? Well, I'm going to show him that I'm going to be harder to steal from now on. And guess what happened? Big Ricky shut the fuck up and transferred schools. That's what happened.
I had a similar issue. I grew up as the only white kid.
Oh, he got knocked out, by the way, too. Maybe it was a lucky swing, but yeah.
I was the only white kid in a black neighborhood. My stepdad was black, raised in a black family, and all the racial slurs from all the Mexicans and white kids, in school. You are an N lover, this and that, and literally, I'm fighting daily. It was a daily thing. I got suspended more times. I wasn't even allowed in school 6th grade because of all the fights that I got in the previous year. Because of you call my brother this, call my mom this. All right, we're going to war, right? And that's the society I grew up in. I always had to fight. Confrontation was something I wasn't afraid of. I was very confident in what I'm capable of. So I don't shy away from a debate or a confrontation if I'm confident in where I stand. And I don't actually engage into something where I don't necessarily am confident in what I know and what I could present. I wouldn't have done this debate with you or have this conversation if I did not think I could present, a decent case to where I am presenting questions to you that you maybe couldn't answer yourself. And I think that is something, people don't do. I prepared myself for it.
Well, that's the thing, though, is I'm extremely stubborn and hard-headed when it does things. Maybe that's why I became a good bodybuilder, because I was like, even though I'm 5 plates deep in this and I feel like I'm going to puke, I'm going to find a way out of this hole at the bottom. So it's like, I've always fought my own stubbornness. I would have done, to be honest with you, I would have done this debate even if I was going to get my ass whooped, Glenn, to be honest with you, because I would have learned something. Like, I don't run from a lesson. I think that's why, the most stubborn people can be the fastest learning students, in society, because if you're willing to get your ass whooped, you're willing to learn how to not get your ass whooped the next time. So I think that this is a foregone thing in society that men have lost. It's gone the way of the dodo, and we got to fight to try to get this back by creating these examples of this.
And we need to encourage this, because this is actually fruitful for for men in general. This right here, why do you believe what you believe? That's basically almost what the presence of the argument is. Why do you believe this? Can you present an argument outside of what someone else tells you? Can you present me an argument that shows me why you believe what you believe, not just because someone told you on Sunday? You presented a very good argument many times, right? That didn't even have to deal with the Bible, right? And I appreciated that, because you're like, look, even common sense says if we do this, this, and this, it seems problematic, don't you think? Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, it's my favorite,
because here's the thing, though. This is one thing. The reason why, even if I become the most scholarly person when it comes to theological and entailments and apologetics, things like this, the reason why I don't want to do this is because the moment you're in an argument, you're the guy knocking as a Jehovah's Witness on the door saying, have you talked to the Lord, the Savior Jesus? Because the moment I bring up Jesus Christ, I put up a wall. The second the person doesn't already believe in this. So I have to destroy this belief system that they have of banging different women. If I was to tell this guy, well, if you're banging different women, you're creating more hoes while complaining about the same problem. How is this not a contradictory position?
That's what I said about red pill too.
Person gets this, but all of a sudden, when I destroy this position, you create this void. What can then fill the void?
Yep.
And would you say, right?
I point out this too is like, okay, if ultimately, when you look at the Bible in general, there's consequences for actions, period. Whether you do this or you do that, there's always going to be a consequence. You never get to avoid it, right? And the Bible shows us the best way to live a life and live a good life. And I think that's what all people want to desire and strive for. And even, like I said, I had an atheist friend and I challenged him, just read the Bible and just tell me if you don't think that's a good way of living, right? He was a senior chief in the Navy. He was stationed up in Washington when I lived out there. And 2 years later, I ended up moving back to California, and he ends up calling me. He goes, you know what? I don't believe in this whole Jesus thing, but I have to admit, I've been giving my guys underneath me, quotes from Proverbs and telling them, stay away from the wayward woman, stay away from, watch this. He's like, I didn't even know this was in here. I was like, oh, that's cool. He's like, this is really good advice. I'm like, yeah, I think so too. 4 years after that, he gets out, he retired as a chief. Now he's, in Nevada, and he's an usher or a lead someone at his church. And it just took presenting it in a way that he could actually receive. Hey, forget the spirituality of it. Just tell me if you don't think this is good advice, and it just finding a way to approach the message in a way that people could receive it. And I think that's important.
Well, here's the thing. I'll even give you this little nugget before we kind of wrap up today, because I feel like this was kind of a fruitful discussion. I feel like to be honest, Glenn, I was looking forward to a brawl. I didn't feel like I got a brawl, but I'm pretty sure, Glenn, I will give you my word on this. You and I are going to brawl at some point. It's going to be for real when it comes to some debate or something like that. I'm not ruling that out. This is also the what if thing that we met into with the whole, is it a sin or not? We're still here. It's ambiguous, right? But here's the thing that I'm going to go to. I'm not ambiguous whether or not I'm going to have a brawl in the future. It could be with you. It could be with somebody else. But this is my whole point. I could be the dumbest person in society. Box ahead. I could be the dumbest person in society. Box of rocks in my head. Muscle dumb bodybuilder guy. But as long as I'm with the likes of Andrew Wilson, Rachel Wilson, Jay Dyer, and I'm on this Orthodox Christian side, and I can look at church history, in the goodness of its whole and nature and unchanging standard, I'm brighter than the geniuses that we have in society that have 300 IQs and 250. It doesn't matter where I'm at right now in my head. As long as I'm on this side and I'm trying the best I can and getting up and leaning into good men, like I said, in the crucible, I'm brighter than all these people in society if I'm coming with a humble spirit and I'm in a better position. It doesn't matter. So when all this talk about IQ and everything else, to me, that's like the least of my worries. That's why I always run towards a fight, because I fear for nothing. I have greater things to fear because I have my own salvation at hand.
Absolutely. And I agree with you. And I really am thankful for this conversation. I really am, honest. I thank you for your time. I'm glad that we had this sparring session, because I think it was a very fruitful overall, and especially I think the audience really got the best benefit of it. And I think that we showed them how to have a fruitful sparring session in a way that doesn't necessarily have to be, all sound bites, and we actually literally tried to find an answer, not just try to make someone look stupid, and I think sometimes that is more beneficial to the audience. It's not as fun for us, but it's more beneficial.
Happen, Glenn.
I'll make fun of you. I'm gonna make fun of you later on today, but like, he didn't beat me.
It's gonna happen, bro.
He said that he's gonna beat me. He said he's gonna drag me. He said it on a podcast, all calling me out. Boy, I didn't get dragged at all. I said straight right here. I'm 10 toes down.
Oh, you don't want to take accountability. Now you turn feminist again. Okay, cool. I see how the plot twist. This is the plot twist.
I didn't get dragged.
Turn feminist at the end of this whole debate.
Did you drag me? I don't think you dragged me at all. I didn't even move.
You sound like that black woman now on the podcast.
Oh God.
Hey, her wig, she had the worst wig. I'm gonna tell you right now, this is the worst wig.
Like, Yo, I'm sitting there looking at like my aunt Tanya would be so embarrassed if her just being like that. I was like, man, the dumb things that they said too. And this is go on to that topic. This is something that I see but men suffering with now, and it's just this victim mentality overall. We see it in every community, every ism. You know, everybody like that thinks that they're a disadvantage. There's all this victim mentality. I can't do anything to change my position. Yes, you can. You haven't tried everything to change your position. And you know when you have tried everything is when you're dead, okay, and you haven't gotten anywhere. Like every day that you're breathing, you have the opportunity. And I tell this guys all the time, it's a mindset thing. You have the opportunity to get yourself in a better position. Now, what you choose to do with that opportunity, that's on you. You could squander it. You could bitch about how it's unfair or how this is unjust, or that because you have too short legs and you're not 6 feet tall that you're not going to get the same opportunity as a guy that's 6 foot. You can bitch about that stuff, or you could take what you have and play the hand that you're dealt and be as successful as you possibly can. Which one do you want to do? You can either make moves or make excuses. And like Tom didn't agree with that, but I actually, at the end of the day, that is really what it is. You could either tell me why you never got to your goal, or you can show me how you got to your goal.
Tom was too liberal for me. He was leaning towards making too many excuses. He was leaning towards taking away more accountability from them, because he was like, the moment he said that you're creating a false binary, automatically I picked up on this. I was like, ooh, I got smoke for you. And then I got smoke for this old man in this walker that's going to get his ass beat. Because I'm like, as long as he brings the walker to the fight, we can squabble over whatever it is. So it's like, I don't care. I would debate tomfoolery on this, how stupid that is. But he didn't even want it with me. He was wrong on that automatically, because he did not even refute my whole claim. So it's like, also OG was wrong on that. He can't debate me to save his life through a paper bag that's wet. And it's like, when I go on these panels, I'm really looking for discourse and disagreement, because in the disagreement I'm looking for are irrational things that don't make sense, in the perpetuation of removal of accountability through means of feminism, through other things as well too. I will combat this till the day I die. And people can say, well, you're not the best debater. I don't care. All I got to do is destroy one person and my whole month is made.
And you know what? Like, here's the thing. And I tell people all the time, like, I love what Andrew does and I enjoy what you do. But my approach is not going to be either one of those. I have a different approach. Because first, I want to understand more. I'm somebody that I really desire to understand why you see things the way you do. And first, if I understand how you got there, then I have a way to, reverse engineer that to see where the errors are and where I could actually point out, well, this could be, don't you think that this is actually really what this could be instead of this, other option that you're taking, right? And
wait, hold on. How does Andrew not do this though? That's the thing though.
He does. I'm saying I'm not as like,
he does an internal critique and goes through the logic and how he came to this conclusion. Yeah. You guys are speaking the same thing.
I'm not as confrontational, adversarial with them, because I want their guard to be down, and I don't not like a.
Hold on, though. If they're confrontational with you, which is what happens with Andrew all the time,
match their position. That's different.
What are you going to do?
Well, you actually, deal with you address how you're being addressed, right? But it's not always the same case. I don't have it's not like a one tool. I don't just have a hammer, right? The hammer is used for hammering, but then you know what? I got a framing hammer or a finishing hammer that's for the more detailed.
Andrew's hammer is a multi-tool, though. A lot of people
he got a Swiss Army knife that ends up having like a nuclear button at times, because he
has a big ass Swiss Army knife. It isn't just a hammer; it's a hammer that has a knife, scissors, medical kit.
And I think, and I tell people all the time, like I was saying this earlier or yesterday, I wonder how people don't realize when people try to be like an Andrew light, try to do exactly what Andrew does or, mimic him. I was like, do they not realize that it's actually almost very offensive to be like, you're being a very bad version or impression of him. Instead of being the best or your version of you, how you naturally do it, you're trying to be the Timu Andrew. And actually, that is actually, disservicing actually what he really is doing.
Do you know a few that are like this, Glenn?
Oh, I do know people that are like this. Very much so. I have debated them. I've even had them on my show, and and I've said this, the people that I tend to have the problem the most are the people that think they know everything, that they cannot be wrong at all. They're not even coming to the conversation with the understanding that, I could be wrong. and being open to being wrong, because then they double down on being wrong, and then nobody learns anything, right? And I think that's a problem, But I think there's a lot of guys that, and let me ask you this, and we can end up after this, because there's another conversation I want to present to you. Maybe we could have another discourse, but I think that
we will. Go ahead, continue.
I think the purity culture of like maybe the late 90s, mid 90s to early 2000s actually did more of a disservice in the sense of the outcome. The outcome, what we see is now the hookup culture, right? So we had this purity culture, this course correction from what things were like during the 60s and 70s, free love and all that shit, right? And then purity culture comes to try to course correct, and sex is bad, like shaming in this aspect. And then from there, we end up having the hookup culture. So the purity culture did not necessarily be as successful as, intended, because they didn't actually address sex properly.
Wait, what period culture are you talking about?
I'm talking about like the promise rings, that whole in like the mid 90s, and like where they were talking about like sex is wrong.
I think that was good. I think there was another reason for that, and I think the other reason for that is we had the breakup. We had the push for women outside the home, which was bastardizing this. And then when you have absentee fathers because women ran the fathers out, that's not a conversation that's talked about. Is that because women will say, well, how come the father's leaving? Well, when I talk to people like there's like the legal attorney, forgot his name, but I heard him talking about this on a podcast. What's that?
The lead attorney?
The lead attorney. When I had heard him talk about this on a podcast, he said when men fight, he actually encourages them to not fight for their kids because he says, well, there's $5,000 for a discovery that you start off with. And it's like most of these men are going into debt for fighting for their kids. So it's like, how is that not the women running them off as well, too? So it's like, I've talked about this on Sarah the Raging Tomatoes channel, and she's like, well, it's because the men aren't fighting. Well, there's a reason why men aren't fighting. You think men just don't want to pay child support for the rest of their life and not have dual custody? There's a reason for this. So I mean, it's like there's I think
we could actually take a page though. We could actually learn something from the feminist movement in a sense. And what did they do? They actually gathered. Right? They all of them got together and they was a group of them. It wasn't just one man. Remember when the Million Man March happened? They actually made changes when men gathered under one mission and said, "Hey, this needs a change. We are demanding a change." But we don't have that type of organization.
Glenn, I don't think that's an absolute concept.
No, I don't think it's an absolute, but I think it's better than what we have now.
How it doesn't work. It can work against your agenda. Remember, these people were campaigning against Trump, and they had all these marches recently. Did that even work at all?
Yeah, but they were all women. Big difference. I'm saying
all women. It didn't work at all.
I'm saying, but what we do see
more towards Trump than anything else.
It did, but what we do see when men gather. When men gather, they're actually better at that. When we normally gather, we normally solve a problem. You don't go out with your friends just to get coffee to catch up, do you? Because that's pretty, feminine, right? But if your buddy said, "Hey, I need help changing my tires or changing my brakes, can you help me out with that?" That's a task. That's a project. That's how we gather. We need to realize that we actually have a reason to gather and address a problem. And here's the real issue: is that we actually are too selfish. That's why we're not doing it.
Well, we have individualism as a religion now, and that's the thing, though. Is I'll even debate you on whether or not purity culture was bad or not. I think that purity culture was a good thing, and I don't think that alone was one of the things.
I don't think it was alone, but I think did anybody teach sex properly during the purity culture? No, they told you to stay away from it. If you had thoughts of sexual, thoughts, you were lusting, you were sinning, they end up having more shame to it rather than actually addressing it and saying, hey, you know what? Your feelings that you got right now, it's normal, it's natural. God actually gave you that for a reason, but let me tell you something. You need to practice discipline in this because in the right confine, in the right setting, that is a very good thing. That was never brought up. That was never how
purity culture thing. Like we can't create a monolith of that. We can say that there's missing pieces. We can say that we have scripture that's taught but isn't expounded on or explained. I mean, that could be another thing too. That's an example.
True. I just think that it failed. It did not do the job that they expected it to do. Okay, during that same time, you had TV shows like 16 and Pregnant. How did the purity culture do when you have TV shows on MTV called 16 and Pregnant? Don't think it did a very good job.
That proves my whole point is that when you have something that's shamed and it's exaggerated, when we have something in society, case in point, when I went to school and there was a pregnant woman in class, everybody stayed away from her. You don't want to be like her. More people were adverse to getting pregnant at school.
No, but they actually
this created a deterrent, believe it or not, I believe.
But the show actually encourage women to get pregnant. Young girls get pregnant. Oh, she has a TV show. She's my age.
Hold on. You're just saying because of this? Is this where do you get this information from?
I'm just saying, like, they didn't deter it as they thought it was. They didn't actually have the effect as they went into it to have.
Yeah, but Glenn, do you realize that this could be mapped on anything? When we saw circus freak shows of the bearded lady, do you think that incentivized women to want to be this because it was such an attraction? They wanted to see this, and it was something they paid money to see. Do you think it incentivized women to grow hair?
Actually, I think it encouraged women to let that hair grow on their chin a little bit more because they thought another income.
I doubt that. There was never a push for society of
bearded
ladies.
I don't know. I can't say.
Point to the society of bearded ladies. I'd love to see this, Glenn. Show me one society of bearded ladies.
There's all these chicks in LA right now with hairy armpits. I think they're descendants.
Yeah, you're saying now, but I'm saying during the time when you had to pay to see the fat woman on the scooter at Walmart, she was the fattest woman at the world at the time. People paid money to see that. What's common in society now? Do you think that there was a bunch of women that are like, I need to be fat like that so I can get the attention?
What I'm pointing at, like the 16 and pregnant, the lack of shame or the lack of like, not necessarily shame, but like the fact that we accepted it and we actually made a TV show to showcase this, these young girls that are 16 and pregnant in a way.
I don't think it promoted that. Because here's the thing, though, with my example that I showed you, the fat woman that people paid money to see, that's the same thing we have now. She would have got paid a lot of money for being on this freak show. Nobody wanted to emulate that. They were in awe of this. There's always going to be freak shows. And since the dawn of time, we've always had some sort of freak show. It's just that when we had the modern equivalent of this, you can't tell me that, I want to be in her position. Yeah, maybe they would have wanted the attention, but nobody would have said, I want the baby with no father.
But the
that's crazy.
But the idea was that they were pregnant at a young age without a father, and culturally it was becoming more acceptable because it was being normalized on TV shows like this, rather than the TV shows, showing it as a negative. It actually normalized it more.
But that's the problem, Glenn. That's the problem that you and I are going to run into, because I didn't hear women running around saying that that's something that they wanted, even though culturally we can say propaganda was accepted. Maybe the push for this because people wanted to see the freak show at the time of the woman who got pregnant at 16 and had to deal with this. We felt bad for her and things like this. But I don't think I've heard women, correct me if I'm wrong, have you even heard women say, damn, I should be pregnant because of this? Have you ever heard of that before? That's crazy.
Okay, crazy thing is I actually had a cousin that wanted to audition for 16 and pregnant when she got pregnant, but that's crazy. It is.
I don't think it's commonplace for people to see it. Now, we have stupid people in society. It's going to happen. We have technological advances that are happening, right? But people are getting dumber because attention spans decreasing. The comprehension levels decreasing, all this other shit, right? We can admit that propaganda is working a little bit more because people are dumb. There's the dumbing down of society.
We're not doing, we're really bad at propaganda. We don't incentivize and we don't propaganda well.
I don't think women are being propagandized to be single moms. Like meaning like, no, they are being propagandized to be single moms. Let me rephrase this and slow down. Sometimes I can speak.
I would retract that.
This is what I'm saying, Glenn. I'm saying that I don't think that women are running around saying, I just want a baby with no father. I don't think that this is something that they're espousing that they want in their lives.
Not the majority of women. I will definitely say that I've heard women say that they just want a baby. Whether they get it from artificial insemination.
Yeah, they want a baby, but I don't think it's becoming as prominent as we think it was.
No, it's not. But I think it's becoming, in a sense, as in women's eyes, as a solution to their problem of not being in a relationship. Like, well, I still want a baby. Here's how I could get a baby, and I don't need to be in a relationship. It's almost like they're cutting corners, and they are setting themselves up for failure as a last-ditch effort, to achieve this goal, right? Guys do the same thing. Like when I talk about sex robots, that's going to be horrible for men because it's going to be like, they're not going to want to, pursue women because why? I have this Stepford wife that could, don't argue with me and does exactly what I want. There's no incentivization,
Well, we are going to be incentivized because remember we talked about the plummeting birth rate and all this other shit. So it's like, so here's the thing, Glenn. We've had a very productive conversation. I feel like we have some kind of understanding about certain things. Now, towards the end of this, I know where we're definitely going to have some beef on ideology, and we're going to come to blows on camera at some point. It's going to happen, right? Between you and me. I'm not ruling that out. It's going to happen. I already know.
I'll be gentle.
But here's my thing. I'm not going to be gentle. I'm going to be cell block Bubba number 5. Like, this is what I'm saying. So here's the thing. When you and I have this confrontation, I'm going to fucking brawl, and I'm not going to pull punches. I'm not going to, this was just a good conversation because I just needed to understand something that I couldn't get this reconciliation done on Sarah's channel. Because if I'm on Sarah's channel, I'm going to be like, I just need a win. There's also that. Plus, I also need to show him how he's wrong. We would have ran into this wall regardless. But here's the thing that I'm getting to. At the end of the day, I think that Christians are going to be outbreeding everybody else. I think that people with traditional values are going to be outbreeding everybody else as well, too. Secularism is going to die. All these other cultures. Now, the biggest enemy that we have is is other cultures outbreeding us. Muslims, Islam, and we're talking about this. It's like now we have an invasive culture that's immigration is incentivizing people to come in because there was no adherence to law. The law didn't enforce immigration. Now, because we have this, people have this whole tinfoil hat conspiracy that we have all these sleeper cells, maybe in America. I don't know. But this is the thing, though, is I think that the righteous will be outbreeding people, having kids, having more traditional families, and the people that are going to be self-deleting themselves, transformers, people that are going to be transforming their kids, people that want to be cat ladies at 60 years old and die. I'm not really, frankly, worried about those. All of my messages for is the men that are going to be righteous and walk this path and want to get into these trenches with me and fight this degeneracy of secularism. If they want to be here doing this with me, I'm going to implore them to fight alongside me and actually help me out because we can learn something from each other.
I agree. And I agree with everything you said. But I think that there's a part that's missing. And I'm just talking about overall in America, right? I'm looking at the West. There needs to be, we talk about accountability. I think we both agree that men and women fail at accountability, right? And I think that the church actually needs, and I would say the church as the overall Christian community of different whatever doctrines or whatever, but the church in itself needs to go back to biblical patriarchy, what was being taught for 100 or 1,980 years before they introduced egalitarianism and complementarianism, because both of them are rejection of what was originally taught. And in doing that will be the first step that needs to take place. But until the church actually is accountable for what they have done by adopting these two doctrines that were not originally biblically standard and more of a appeal as an appeasement to feminism, we're not going to see the outcome that you were just mentioning, because there has to be accountability at the church level and change there in order for the people to change overall. Because the church is supposed to influence culture, not be influenced by culture. We're supposed to be the lighthouse that is the guiding light, right? We're supposed to be the salt of the earth. But if we're not playing that role, we cannot actually expect the outcome that you presented. And that's what I'm saying.
It's going to be hard to fight, because here's the thing. I'll even admit to you, I became a minister overnight. I sent $50 to something. And this is the reason why, because I had my own practice of, I think it was like massage therapy, myopractic medicine. And then I had like my personal training cert, all this other stuff. And I graduated with a degree in dietetics, all this other stuff, right? Put all this together and I have my own practice. What do I need to do to become tax exempt? Oh, I can have a religious practice. So my mindset where I was coming from this, because I'm laying hands on people. And it's like, if we're laying hands on people. So just understand that my logic was going down this road. If I can become a minister overnight, we have to think that we presuppose that other people are becoming ministers overnight and developing their own ministry and doctrines. Look at Nala Ray. She came from like porn or corn to doing this. I was in the industry, believe it or not. I got out of this. I will never have my own ministry. I will never turn around. It'll be like, if I even think about having my own ministry or doing certain things, it would be like 10 years down the line, 20 years. And then I would have to ask the church for permission, or if I can do this or go to seminary or anything like this. I have to realize that normal people in secularism don't know that they could turn overnight and just all of a sudden pop up and have their ministry, because it's like, what point is this snake oil that I'm selling people? It's like, if I could turn overnight, then I'm telling other people that they can fake turn as well too, and not be real and genuine, just like I would be if I waited 10 years and 20 years and actually presented longevity in my Christendom walk down this path of trying to become a better man. Because it's hard for you to say, well, I just stopped overnight cold turkey, and me believe that, because I can't do that. So it's hard
it's not
to
realistic
when you have Nala Ray having her own ministry, all this other stuff. And it's like, my whole point is, as long as we have people turning ministers overnight and doing this, it's going to be a hard problem to fix, because anybody can be righteous and above you. And you can't, now we have shields that are given to people, and they can't be judged and criticized, because now all of a sudden we have this a corn to faith pipeline. And it's like, now that we have this, we have people that are absolved of everything. They have shields. And I'm like, no, that's bullshit. Like, I'm not going to feed into this, because I see the real picture. And as long as other people can realize that this can be fake and people can get this overnight, it's going to continue. It's a grift. It's seriously just a grift, and you're fake and you're phony. I'll call
and I tell people all the time, I'm not a good person. I try to be good. There's nothing good about me personally, other than what God has given me and has shown me, and it has walked me through in life, right? Because I'm fallen, right? I've hurt people. I've done bad things to people. I'm not good. I'm not a role model that I encourage anybody to aspire to. Learn from my mistakes. I talk about a lot of my mistakes, learn from those, is my ultimate message. But let me point you in the direction that I am going, and I've seen the improvement in my life. That's what I'm trying to get guys to do, is not do the same thing that I did. I'm trying to help them avoid, like in Proverbs, Solomon's writing to help these guys to avoid these mistakes that he did. And I don't think we're doing that enough. And I like that. That's me. I'm not trying to be in ministry. That's no role, no desire to be in ministry. But I do use the knowledge that I have gained from my time in ministry as, for my own knowledge, but also to actually bring up conversations like what we had to really kind of get to the nitty gritty of things and why we believe things. And I think that's important. But I think it's a good time to wrap it up. We hit 3 hours and a half.
We're definitely doing it. I mean, you're not even counting the panel we did today too. So I mean,
oh my God, I didn't even factor that in. Yeah,
doing an Ironman marathon, bro. Like, to be honest with you. So
yeah, we gone the distance. You know what, Martae, I appreciate your time, sir. Really, I do. I look forward to the next one. And I also look forward to being on the same side with you on one of these debates. We don't always have to, beat each other up, but I have no problem beating you up, to get you ready for the next fight. You know what I'm saying?
I'm not going to get beat up, but you have no problem learning lessons. Good.
I love lessons.
As you're a student, we could bring you on board.
Yeah, I love lessons. Lessons mean I've actually learned something. If I'm always winning, I haven't learned shit.
Well, then I guess I'm not learning anything, because I'm always winning. So I mean,
well, you learned today. You learned that day. You didn't drag me.
Yeah, I can learn that this wasn't a debate, so there was no dragging needed. But here's the thing that I'm going to point to before I go. There's been debates that I've been in where I didn't say much, because Andrew, sometimes when we have a debate together, I can't get a word in edgewise. He's laughed at this when I said this, and it's like I become mute because he's so competent at what he does. But here's the point that I'm getting at. I had two people come to me in my DMs, and although even the enemy Charlie said, you didn't say anything, you're a cuck, you're just in the corner or whatever. Well, it's because he destroyed you and there was nothing left for me to add to this conversation anyways. But back to this, in my DMs, people saw debates with me and Andrew. They were like, Martae, you didn't say much, but that Andrew's got a lot of good points. And they found Andrew through me. And when they found Andrew through me, they were like, oh, so this guy's an Orthodox Christian too? Blah, 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 blah. Next thing you know, they're hitting me up and they're like, hey, I just bought an Orthodox Bible. And it's like, so even if I don't contribute much, by my association, Andrew is leading people to Christ. And that's not talked about enough. Matter of fact, the opposite's talked. You're pissing people off. These feminists are mad. They're getting pitchforks against Rachel Wilson too. All this other stuff. But that's not talked about, is that if you're an association of people who are Christ-like and walking in Christ, and actually, matter of fact, they're the best example for what a wife and a husband should be, because they can't put a piece of paper between them. You can't separate them.
Oh, dude, you should see the video that I made about them. I made a video actually acknowledging exactly what you said about Andrew and Rachel. And it was me and Rachel did a show a couple of years back, and the way that she was talking about her husband, I was like, you don't hear women talk about their husband like this. And she actually used my favorite phrase. She's like, I will serve him as a Lord, lower class L, like Sarah. And I love that part in Peter, because First Peter 3 mentions that you are, the daughters of Sarah. She acknowledged, Abraham as Lord, right? And when Rachel said that, I was like, that is amazing. I love the way that she talks about Andrew. Is like, every guy should want their wife to talk about them like Rachel talks about Andrew and admires him. That just kind of shows the fruit of that relationship. And I think that needs to be more aspired to. No, I agree with you. I think they are amazing. And I think that Andrew, I've said this like last year, that Andrew's probably led more men to look into orthodoxy, Christianity, just by being on debates and presenting this very patriotic, masculine, without shame, masculinity, and with no worry about what other people think. And more people probably in the last 2 years have looked into orthodoxy than ever before because of his exposure and influence on these podcasts and these sound bites. And I think that he didn't even realize he was probably going to be, in a way, evangelizing in the metric that he did. He thought he was just going out there to wreck these guys in their worldview, but really it was an evangelistic tool. Oh yeah. So I mean, I said that 2 years ago. So I agree with you. I definitely agree with you. But I am saying it's midnight. 6 a.m. is going to come soon. And
yeah, it is. I got to wake up, and we got liturgy tomorrow. But here's the thing, though. You and I are going to fight. It can be adversarial. It's probably going to be, and I look forward to that. And that's the thing, though, is like going down this whole train of thought process in trying to be more Christ-like as men. One thing I will say is that I consider them family, like Andrew and Rachel family to me. So when I say that, I actually mean that, meaning like until I get a wife, and even if I get a wife, let's say he calls me one night and says, hey, bro, I need you. Have you ever seen that movie called The Town? And the guy asks him to join him. He doesn't care what he says. That's me. Mm-hmm. Yeah. How big is the ditch I'm digging? I don't care. Like, as long as I get a shovel, that's it, Andrew. That's all I care. I'm not going to ask you what. If he says, I need you on a plane now, the nation's going to civil war. I'm like, okay, I'm going to camp outside your house. I have enough food. Worry about your own family. I got us covered. I know my duty in this crucible family. And you could say, well, maybe you just created a cult here. But it's like, but at the same time, hold on real quick.
I hear you, though.
We don't have men like this nowadays. If I'm married and I have a wife, guess what? My wife's coming where they're at. I'm just going to be like, we're tent. And I'm like doing the night watch, and I'm watching out to make sure that nobody invades this house. They got to get through me to get through this man. Like,
honor.
We would die for our brothers, man. And that's how I see it, man. I really mean that, honestly, from the bottom of my heart.
No, I agree. And I've been friends with Andrew and Rachel for several years. When Andrew last year, when he came out here for whatever, I picked him up, and me and him did Jubilee together when he was debating Destiny. I called Destiny a Coomer gremlin to his face. That was my one little, shot at him. Me and Andrew, we were friends. We talk, not as often as we did last year, but I had a lot going on this year with my mentor passing away and stuff. Just didn't have the time to cross, connect. But no, I still look at Andrew as a great, inspiration and a brother. I love Rachel. She's always been very, the whole family's been very grateful and blessed, generous to me. So I've always appreciated them. When my mentor passed away in May, Andrew hit me up right away and, gave his condolences, and I appreciated that. So, they always have a very important place in my heart. Although we may be at different sides of the conversation, I still think you're a good guy. All right. Even though you're going to have to learn today, I take the,
Glenn Lawrence, you're gonna get knocked out. I'm telling you right now. I'm not holding back. If you and me have a debate, you get knocked out, bro. And I'm gonna pick you up and dust you off, and I'm gonna push you right back in your corner for round 2.
All right.
That's how I do people, bro. So.
That's okay. But if you don't get up, I'm gonna put a blanket over your head, give you a little binky, and play the lullabies for you.
You notice how you said if? Yeah, stick to that, bro.
Because here's the thing, I'm realistic enough to know that any man could be beat at any given day. So I just stay prepared.
I'm gonna let you believe that, bro. We can end
Well-
on that note if you want to.
All right, bro. You have a good one. I enjoyed the conversation. Chat, I hope you guys enjoyed the conversation. Until next time, peace.
All right, bro.
All right, have a good one.
You too.